Chapter 1448. Inside the cave. Second uncle, we can't keep guarding like this. Sir Patian could be considered to be depressed to the extreme because whether or not Longao was here was still an unknown. Taking a step back. Even if Longao was here, if Longao didn't appear for a lifetime, would the two of them have to guard here for a lifetime? Sir Feng's face was very gloomy, and his heart was filled with endless anger. He had been played by Longao ruthlessly. If it wasn't for the special period, he believed that he would have been killed by the old ancestor. Thinking about it now, he still felt scared. At this moment, Sir Feng couldn't wait to tear Longao into pieces. Patian, we still can't be sure whether Longao has swallowed the heaven and earth spirit vein or not. Sir Feng's voice was very solemn. If Longao has really swallowed the heaven and earth spirit vein, his cultivation speed will greatly increase. Once he breaks through to the Nirvana realm and swallows Jianling, the consequences will be unimaginable. Second uncle, I have a feeling that Longao hasn't swallowed the heaven and earth spirit vein. Why? Sir Feng was a little curious. He didn't know what Patian meant. Second uncle, I believe you should know about the battle with the Dragon Clan. Everyone knew about the battle of the Dragon Clan, and it was precisely because of this battle that Longao's reputation soared to the extreme, because other than the experts at the peak of martial arts, no one was able to leave alive under the taboo power. Longao was the first person to leave alive from the forbidden power. During the battle with the Dragon Clan, in order to save Longao, Jianling resisted the forbidden power of the Dragon Clan. If there wasn't a strong relationship, would Jianling do that? Sir Feng didn't speak. He just listened quietly. This time, Longao has repeatedly entered our Wanshou sect and refused to leave. His goal is to obtain the heaven and earth spirit vein. I heard Longao say that there is only one way to save Jianling. Swallow the heaven and earth spirit vein. Sir Feng wasn't a fool. If he still didn't understand Sir Potion's words, he would really be a fool. He nodded. Second uncle, you're right. So, according to my guess, Longao didn't devour the heaven and earth spirit vein. The one who really devoured the heaven and earth spirit vein was the sword spirit. Patian, what are you trying to say? In front of Longao, Sir Feng and Sir Patian could be considered to have a temporary truce. The two of them knew very well that as long as they could kill Longao and devour Jianling, they would be able to break through to the peak of martial arts. In front of the peak of martial arts, everything was like floating clouds. Longao will not devour Jianling. Sir Patian had full confidence in this. Sir Patian, you really know me well. Longao, you've finally appeared. Seeing Longao suddenly appear in front of them, both Sir Patian and Sir Feng were overjoyed. Just as the old ancestor had guessed, Longao did not leave, but stayed in the cave. Reincarnation doppelganger. Longao would not be stupid enough to face Sir Patian and Sir Feng alone. Haven't you been looking for me? He snorted coldly. Sir Feng forcibly suppressed his anger and said coldly, Longao, do you still remember our bet? Longao was a little amused. He had tricked Sir Feng this time. It would be strange if Sir Feng was willing to let it go. Looking at Longao's sneer, Sir Feng became more and more furious. Endure, he had to endure. Sir Feng was very clear that he could not act rashly. Once Longao disappeared, he could not afford to take the blame. The old ancestor was extremely angry because he did not get the Jianling and lost the heaven and earth spirit vein. Provoking the old ancestor at this time was a suicidal act. Longao. He waved his hand. Without waiting for Sir Feng to speak, Longao said, Sir Feng, you are not qualified to talk to me. A shameless person who refuses to admit his loss is really disgusting. Disdain, contempt, ridicule. Sir Feng's anger was like a volcano that was about to erupt. If he did not forcibly control himself, Sir Feng would have already exploded. Wanshou sect. Wanshou mountain range was known as the place with the most abundant heaven and earth spirit qi. The disciples of Wanshou sect relied on the heaven and earth spirit qi to cultivate several times faster than ordinary people. However, the current situation was completely different. For some unknown reason, the heaven and earth spirit chi in Wanshou mountain range had decreased several times. All the disciples of Wanshou sect were in a state of panic, not knowing what had happened. All the elders of Wanshou sect were gathered in the main hall. After hearing the news, their faces were very ugly. Because the heaven and earth spirit vein was the most precious treasure of Wanshou sect. Now that it was forcefully swallowed by someone, they knew very well what it meant. Sect Master, the heaven and earth spirit vein has been swallowed by Longao, directly affecting the heaven and earth spirit chi in Wanshou mountain range. We can't let this go on. He cursed fiercely in his heart. As the sect master of Wanshou sect, he had the greatest responsibility for Longao swallowing the heaven and earth spirit vein. But now that things had come to this point, there was nothing he could do. Everyone, we need to discuss this matter at length. The old ancestor has already thought of a way. From now on, lock down the entire sect. No one is allowed to leave without permission. Anyone who disobeys will be killed without mercy. Everyone looked at each other and saw a trace of helplessness in each other's eyes. Even the old ancestor had come out, what else could they say? Then, the Wanshou sect directly locked down the entire sect. No one was allowed to enter the Wanshou sect, and the disciples were also not allowed to leave without permission. Everyone was very curious. Was it because of Longao again? They were very surprised, because no one would have thought that a little Longao would cause such a huge commotion in the Wanshou sect, even to the extent that the sect had been sealed off several times. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, who would have believed it? The sect master had given the order personally, and with the help of the old ancestor, no one dared to disobey. Shirchong had tried his best to block the news, but for some reason, the news of Longao causing trouble in Wanshou sect and swallowing the heaven and earth spirit vein still spread out. Everyone who heard the news was shocked. Longao swallowed the heaven and earth spirit vein? Everyone knew what the heaven and earth spirit vein meant. 10,000 years ago, the Wanshou sect master sacrificed his lover in order to obtain the heaven and earth spirit vein. It was also because of that battle that the Wanshou sect became famous. Wanshou sect relied on the heaven and earth spirit vein to quickly rise and become one of the 10 forces. For 10,000 years, countless people wanted to obtain the heaven and earth spirit vein, but no one dared to take action, including Jian Tian and the others. The biggest reason was that the heaven and earth spirit vein was the most precious treasure of Wanshou sect. Anyone who dared to take the heaven and earth spirit vein was going against the Wanshou sect master. A person who would sacrifice his lover was completely crazy. Chapter 1449. Longao devoured the heaven and earth spirit veins. Long family was unable to break the Dragon Valley Chi shield. Longao and Dragon sect were completely famous. After all, there was no one else in the world who dared to do this except for Longao. Madman? A madman who didn't care about his life. Long family joined forces with the Martial Artists Alliance, and with the help of the Thousand Beast Ancestor, they still couldn't break the Dragon Valley Chi shield. Since then, whether it was Long family, Martial Artists Alliance, or Thousand Beast Ancestor, they all chose to give up on attacking the Dragon Valley. The 3 superforces had already thought it through. Rather than wasting time here, they might as well attack Longao with all their might. No matter what, Longao still didn't return to the Dragon Valley. Sky Martial Continent. 10 forces. Long Family, Dan Alliance, Martial Artists Alliance, Thousand Beasts Sect, Heaven and Earth Sect, 5 Elements Sect, Wanjan School, Sword Sect, Purple Thunder Sect, and Black Heaven Sect. Any random superpower would be able to shake the Martial Heaven continent, let alone 3 of them. The Wanshou Sect, the Martial Artist Alliance, and the Long Clan could definitely be ranked in the top 5 of the 10 great factions. 3 super forces joining forces to deal with Longao, it felt like a dream. The second day after the 3 super forces failed to attack the Dragon Valley Chi shield, the 3 super forces announced to the world at the same time and issued the so-called kill order. No matter who it was, as long as they could kill Longao, they would be rewarded by the three super forces. With great rewards, there would be brave men. In order to curry favor with the three super forces, many people began to search for Longao. However, no one would have thought that Longao, who had devoured the heaven and earth spirit veins, not only did he not leave the Thousand Beasts sect, he even stayed there. If people knew that Longao was still in the Thousand Beasts sect, who knew if they would scold Longao for being stupid? Three super forces issued a kill order at the same time. This was the first time in 10,000 years that this had happened. Under such circumstances, many people admired Longao very much. It could be said that they admired him from the bottom of their hearts. Strictly speaking, Longao had won the battle between the Longao and the three superpowers. The Sword Sect, the Five Elements Sect, and the Heaven and Earth Sect all stood out to support Longao. What exactly happened? No one knew if Longao was the fuse, because the 10 sides had always been fighting both openly and covertly. 3 against 3. Wanshou Sect. Within the Forbidden Area. Shifeng, Shirpatian, do you think you can keep me here? If other people said this, Shifeng and Shirpatian would snort disdainfully. Except for Longao. With the previous example, Shifeng and Shirpatian didn't dare to be careless because they didn't have the slightest confidence. If Longao still chose to disappear at this time, then they would be in big trouble. It was precisely because of this. Whether it was Shifeng or Shirpatian, they didn't dare to act rashly before they had full confidence. Looking at the expression on their faces, Longao already knew what they were thinking. His face was full of disdain, and he said sarcastically, Shifeng, Shirpatian, if I were you, I would directly die. Living in this world is simply a waste of air. Indifferent. Even if the two of them were unhappy and angry, they still had the same words. Before they had full confidence, they definitely wouldn't act rashly. Trash, trash. Longao, you've gone too far. If he could endure this kind of humiliation, then he wouldn't be Shirpatian. Before Shifeng could react, Shirpotian's figure had already rushed out. Before he arrived, the terrifying aura of heaven and earth had already fiercely suppressed. The aura of heaven and earth couldn't suppress Longao at all, because Longao himself also had the aura of heaven and earth. Regardless of whether he was willing or not, Shifeng knew that he couldn't sit back and watch. If Longao escaped, the consequences would be unimaginable. The two of them joined forces, one left and one right, and began to attack Longao fiercely. The reincarnation doppelganger didn't want to fight with the two of them at all. He turned around and directly headed for the exit. Chase. Of course, the two of them wouldn't let Longao leave. Without the slightest hesitation, they directly chased after him. In a short while, the two of them chased after the reincarnation doppelganger and soon left the cave. As soon as the two of them disappeared, Longao's figure appeared with a sneer. This trick of luring the snake out of the hole was really useful. Without the threat of Shifeng and Shirpatian, it was easy for Longao to leave if he wanted to. He did not continue to stay. Taking advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Longao used space teleportation. In a few moments, in the next second, his figure had already completely disappeared from where he was. The two of them who had just chased after Longao just watched him disappear. They were a little dumbfounded because according to the method left by the old ancestor, as long as they interfered with the spatial fluctuations, Longao wouldn't be able to use the space divine tool to disappear. But the result? Even if they interfered with the spatial fluctuations, Longao still disappeared. If it was in the past, the two of them wouldn't be too worried. After all, before Longao obtained the heaven and earth spirit vein, he would never leave the Wanshou sect. But now, the situation was completely different. Longao had already successfully devoured the heaven and earth spirit vein, and if there were no accidents, Longao would definitely leave the Wanshou sect. If the old ancestor knew about this, it would be very troublesome. Shifeng and Shirpatian looked at each other, and saw a trace of helplessness and fear in each other's eyes. Because if the old ancestor knew about this, it was really unknown whether or not he would take action against them. If the old ancestor really killed them, how could they resist? Second uncle, what should we do now? There is no way, this is not a trivial matter, we can't hide it anymore. Immediately report to the old ancestor, and see how he will deal with it. Sherfone waved his hand. Patian, what's wrong? Sherfone was very curious. He didn't know why his nephew stopped him. After all, this matter could be very serious. If the old ancestor knew that they were hiding something, even if he didn't kill them, he would kill them. Second uncle, if we report to the old ancestor now, do you think he will let us go? I don't know. You also don't have full confidence, in my opinion. Once the old ancestor knows that we didn't capture Longao, he will most likely kill us. No matter what, we can't take the risk. After thinking for a while, Sherfone nodded and said, You are right, we can't take the risk, otherwise it will be a waste to die. Patian, do you have a good idea? It's very simple. Even the old ancestor can't be sure whether Longao is in the forbidden area or not, so as long as you and I don't say anything, I believe no one will know, including the old ancestor. We will just stay here and not know anything. Chapter 1450. Sherfone already understood Sherpotion's intentions. Since things were already like this, even if Sherfone was unwilling, he could only do so. The two of them looked at each other, and without saying anything more, they returned to the cave. Just as the two of them had guessed. Bai Ling had successfully devoured the heaven-earth spirit vein, and Longao did not have to stay any longer. The longer he stayed in the Wanshou sect, the more dangerous it would be. Longao was not afraid of death, but he would not take the risk. With Longao's strength and divine ability, it was easy for him to leave the Wanshou sect, even if the Wanshou sect was sealed. Outside the Wanshou sect. Only now did Longao let out a sigh of relief. Bai Ling had successfully devoured the heaven-earth spirit vein, and the next thing to do was to rush to the sword sect as fast as possible, and let Bai Ling enter the sword chi space. Just do it. Longao wished that Bai Ling would wake up immediately. Because of this, Longao did not hesitate, and immediately rushed to the sword sect. The situation in the Sky Martial continent had changed. For so many years, although the 10 Directions tripod had been fighting in the dark, it had always been peaceful. Only with the rise of Longao, the 10 Directions tripod had become unstable. Without a doubt, the current Longao had become a popular person in the Sky Martial continent. You could not recognize Longao, but you had to know the name Longao. A madman. A madman who did not care about his life. A madman who dared to cause trouble in the Martial Artists Alliance, the Long family, the Wanshou sect, and did not put the 3 superpowers in his eyes. Other than Longao, who would dare to do such a thing? Regarding Longao's crazy actions, some people scolded him, while others admired him. There were many discussions about Longao's legends everywhere. It could be said that in this situation, Longao's crazy deeds were everywhere. Sword sect. Jian Tian and the other two knew that Longao had wreaked havoc in the Myriad Beast sect and devoured the heaven and earth spiritual vein. The 3 of them finally witnessed Longao's craziness. He dared to devour the heaven and earth spiritual veins in broad daylight, completely disregarding the Wanshou sect. Even now, the 3 of them were still in a daze. In the Martial Heaven continent, countless people wanted to obtain a heaven-earth spirit vein, but none of them dared to go to the Myriad Beast sect, including the other 9 superpowers. In the main hall, with a face full of helplessness, Murongena sighed and said, Longao is Longao. What others don't dare to do, only he dares to do. Yixian also laughed. Ancestor, Patriarch, now that Longao has successfully obtained the heaven and earth spirit vein, Longao will definitely come to our sword sect to borrow the sword or a space. At this point, Yixian did not continue. However, the meaning behind his words was clear. Longao had already said that he wanted to borrow the sword or a space. Jian Tian had already agreed. But now was different. If the sword sect helped Longao at this time, it would be a provocation to the Myriad Beast sect. The sword sect, the 5 Elements sect, and the heaven and earth sect could help Longao, but they couldn't openly help Longao devour the heaven and earth spirit vein. After all, the heaven and earth spirit vein was the lifeblood of the Myriad Beasts sect. Without a doubt, the Myriad Beasts sect might really go all out for the heaven and earth spirit vein. At that time, how would the sword sect deal with it? For a Longao, was it worth it? Feng Jian, what do you think? Ancestor, actually, you already have the answer in your heart. Hearing Murongena's words, Jian Tian laughed. Longao, since you're here, please show yourself. Longao didn't hide his aura, so when he arrived, the three of them had already sensed him. The three of them were more or less shocked because they never thought that Longao would not only successfully obtain the heaven and earth spirit vein, but also leave the Myriad Beasts sect. Was the Myriad Beasts sect trash? It was also because of this that Longao's position in their hearts rose by more than one level. Senior Jiantian, I believe you already know why I'm here. I need the largest sword aura space. Getting straight to the point, Longao did not say any more nonsense. Bai Ling had already successfully devoured the heaven and earth spirit vein. As long as Bai Ling entered the sword aura space, she would definitely wake up. Longao couldn't wait for Bai Ling to wake up immediately. Jian Tian seemed to know that Longao was anxious. He nodded and immediately left with Longao without any hesitation. At the exit of the sword aura space. Longao, this sword aura space is the largest sword aura space in the sword sect. I believe it's enough for you. Thank you. At this point, Longao didn't hide anything. He gently carried Bai Ling out and placed her into the sword aura space. Xiling had already entered the sword aura space, but Jian Tian and the other two didn't notice it. Longao didn't enter because, according to Xiling, Bai Ling was extremely powerful after devouring the sword aura. The sword aura alone was enough to kill him. Seeing the entrance slowly closing, Longao heaved a sigh of relief. However, he immediately became worried. Please don't let anything happen to her. Longao was extremely anxious. He was like a child waiting for his mother. Beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead. Seeing Longao in such a state, Jian Tian and the other two were even more surprised. They smiled and said, Longao, it will take some time for the spiritual soul to devour the sword aura. Why don't we wait in the main hall first? All right. Longao was also very clear that it was useless for him to stay here, and it even made him extremely nervous. Rather than that, he might as well follow Jian Tian to the main hall and wait. In the main hall. After this incident, Jian Tian and the other two's attitude towards Longao changed again. Longao, this is unbelievable. You really obtained the spiritual pulse. Until now, the three of us still couldn't believe it. I really want to know how you did it. Regarding this matter, the three of them certainly wanted to know how Longao did it with his strength. In any case, the Wanshou sect was full of experts. Any one of them could easily kill Longao. Even so, Longao successfully obtained the spiritual pulse in the Wanshou sect, which was full of experts. Longao didn't hide much. He was determined not to say what he couldn't say. What he could say, he roughly told them. After hearing this, the three of them sighed. Although Longao said it very simply, the three of them knew very well that in this battle, Longao could be said to have narrowly escaped death. If he let his guard down, he would be doomed eternally. After all, the main reason why Longao was able to obtain the spiritual vein of heaven and earth in the Wanshou sect was due to luck. No matter who did it, Jian Tian asked himself, could he do it if he were in Longao's shoes? In this world, apart from the marvelous mathematician and Tian Dao, how many people could do it? Not to mention doing it, even if they went to the Wanshou sect, how many people had the courage to do it? Chapter 1451. While sighing, the three of them were also a little worried. What did the Wanshou sect mean? Long family mean? What did the Martial Artists Alliance mean? The three of them knew this very well. The Wanshou sect, Martial Artists Alliance, and Long family were all part of the 10 forces, and their strength was obvious. Longao wouldn't be able to compete with any one of them, let alone the three of them joining forces. Now, the three super forces had issued a kill order together. This was the first time in 10,000 years that this had happened. Longao, what are you going to do next? The Sword Sect only supported Longao publicly. If they really went to war with the three super forces for Longao, would the Sword Sect be able to do it? There was no doubt about it. It was impossible for the Sword Sect to become irreconcilable enemies with the three great superpowers for the sake of Longao. Not to mention the Sword Sect, the Heaven and Earth Sect and the Five Elements Sect would do the same. I'll deal with whatever comes my way. These simple words had already made Longao's attitude clear. It also fully reflected Longao's arrogance. It seemed that he did not put the three super forces in his eyes. If it were anyone else, Jiantian and the other two would definitely sneer at them and ignore them. They might even mock them. Ignoring the three super forces was completely stupid. Only Longao did not have the slightest trace of mockery and contempt because the three of them knew very well that Longao must have some extraordinary aspects to be able to make the three superpowers move like a storm. Senior Jiantian, I'll leave the Sword Sect immediately after my spiritual soul devours the sword aura. How could Longao not know what Jiantian meant? However, Longao wasn't angry at all. Instead, he was grateful to Jiantian. Under such circumstances, Jiantian still lent him the sword aura space, which was a great help. Otherwise, he really didn't know what to do. Jiantian sighed deeply in his heart. No one said anything and the hall fell into silence. Bai Ling devouring the sword aura wasn't something that could be done in a day. God knew how long it would take. Jiantian and the other two did not leave. Instead, they accompanied Longao and waited in the main hall. This was already very kind of them. After all, Longao had already offended the three super forces. The Sword Sect could already be considered extremely benevolent by doing this. The next day, the night passed slowly and the sun quietly fell. Lu Changxing, who was reflecting on his mistakes, somehow got the news that Longao was in the Sword Sect. Back then, Lu Changxing was almost killed by Longao. He had always been brooding over it, and had always been looking for an opportunity to avenge himself. Helplessly, for so long, Lu Changxing hadn't found the right opportunity. But now, the opportunity had come. According to the punishment, Lu Changxing couldn't leave the cliff of reflection without permission. However, in order to deal with Longao, Lu Changxing even left quietly. If Jiantian and Murongguina knew about this, it would be a suicidal act. In order to take revenge, Lu Changxing couldn't care about anything else. Lu Changxing wasn't a fool. He knew Longao's strength very well. With his strength alone, it would be difficult to kill Longao. So, he was going to kill with a borrowed knife. And this knife was Longao's sworn enemy, the Martial Artists Alliance, the Long family, and the Wanshou sect. Lu Changxing was full of confidence. As long as this news spread, when the experts of the Martial Artists Alliance, the Long family, and the Wanshou sect came, even the old ancestor and master might not be able to protect Longao. This time, Longao would definitely die. Lu Changxing's move of killing with a borrowed knife could be said to be extremely insidious. As he expected, as soon as the news spread, the Long family, the Martial Artists Alliance, and the Wanshou sect immediately took action. This time, Long Tian, Tong Zun, and the Wanshou sect ancestor came personally with people. It could be said that they were determined to win. Especially the Wanshou sect ancestor. Now, the Wanshou sect ancestor was almost certain that Longao, who had devoured the spiritual veins of heaven and earth, did not continue to stay in the Wanshou sect, but left to go directly to the Sword Sect. As for why, was the Sword Sect stubbornly sticking to Longao? If it was just one sect, it wouldn't be so reckless. But the situation was completely different now. With the three superpowers working together, not to mention Longao, even the Sword Sect would not dare to casually go head-to-head. Otherwise, the Sword Sect would be the one to suffer in the end. The big picture was the most important. Almost everyone was certain that the Sword Sect would not sacrifice the lives of hundreds of thousands of Sword Sect disciples for a single Longao. After receiving the news that Longao was in the sword sect, Shifeng and Shirpatian heaved a sigh of relief. They were really afraid that if Longao did not appear, then the two of them would forever be in the forbidden area, unable to come out. This time, the Wanshou sect ancestor was determined to win. He did not care at all whether Longao lived or died. The only thing he cared about was the Jianling in Longao's hands. The others did not know about this, so the Wanshou sect ancestor wanted to seize the Jianling first. That was why the Wanshou sect ancestor had brought all their Nirvana realm experts. Not only that, but he had also brought hundreds of thousands of spirit beasts. Just the divine beasts alone numbered over 10,000. They had come to the sword sect. Adding on the martial artists' alliance and the Long family, the sword sect was unable to contend with them. The three superpowers had brought tens of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of spirit beasts. They were coming from 3 different directions toward the sword sect. In the blink of an eye, the entire martial heaven continent had received the news. Everyone wanted to watch a good show, so they had all come. This was probably the grandest event in the past 10,000 years. And such a grand event was all for a single person, a youth who had just risen in the past few years. The sword sect, the main hall. Jian Tian and the other 2 had already received the news. Their faces were extremely gloomy. If it was just one superpower, the sword sect wouldn't put them in their eyes. But in the current situation, the Long family, the Martial Artists Alliance, and the Wanshou sect had all come together. If they clashed head-on, the sword sect would definitely suffer. Could it be that they had to kill Longao? Jian Tian and the other 2 couldn't do that. If they did, they wouldn't have lent the sword chi space to Longao. Could it be that they wanted to chase Longao away? The 3 of them were also clear that their souls were still in the sword chi space. As long as their souls hadn't finished devouring the sword chi, they believed that even if they killed Longao, they wouldn't leave the sword sect. Longao, hide for now. Longao nodded. He understood Jian Tian's meaning. In this situation, he could only hide. After all, the 3 superpowers had not come for the sword sect, but for him. He didn't want to implicate the sword sect. Let's go. Since Jian Tian had already made his decision, Murongguina and Yixian didn't say anything. After all, Jian Tian was the one with the most authority in the sword sect, not the 2 of them. Many thanks. Longao will definitely repay this favor in the future. Longao inwardly told himself as he watched Jian Tian and the others disappear. Chapter 1452. In the Sword Sect. The huge square was now filled with a sea of people. Everyone in the Sword Sect gathered in the huge square as the 3 superpowers' armies approached. Everyone knew that a fight would break out if there was any disagreement. At that time, the Sword Sect would be doomed. Many of the Sword Sect's disciples were upset and angry. They didn't know why their sect would go against the 3 superpowers for Longao. Was it worth it? Sacrificing tens of thousands of people for one person? Brother Murong, long time no see. How have you been? Jian Tian, surnamed Murong, was Murongguina's ancestor. Until now, Jian Tian and the other 2 couldn't figure out how Wanshou ancestor and the others knew that Longao was in the sword sect. Was there a traitor in the sword sect? Other than this, there was no other explanation. Brother Shi, Brother Long, Brother Tong, may I know why you've gathered so many people? Pretentious. The 3 of them cursed in their hearts, but on the surface, they were as calm as water. The 3 superpowers didn't want to fight to the death with the sword sect unless they had no other choice. No matter what, the sword sect's strength was obvious. Even if the 3 superpowers could destroy the sword sect, they would have to pay a heavy price. Moreover, Jian Tian wasn't someone to be trifled with. Straight to the point. Long Tian took a step forward. His aura was overbearing as he coldly said, Brother Murong, this time around, we have only come for one thing. As long as you hand over Longao, we will treat this as if it never happened. Otherwise, don't blame us for being ruthless and not recognizing you. Long Tian wouldn't have dared to say this under normal circumstances. But now, The situation was completely different. Long family, martial artists alliance, and Wanshou sect working together. Even the sword sect wouldn't dare to go against them. 1 against 3, could the sword sect do it? There was no doubt about it. Brother Long, I don't know what you're talking about. You want us to search? He snorted coldly. The sword sect was one of the 10 great sects. If it were to be searched so casually, where would the sword sect's face go? Where was Jian Tian's face? What about Muronggena's face? Where would Ji Xian's dignity go? It was almost impossible. Not to mention that Longao was in the sword sect. Even if Longao wasn't here, Jian Tian wouldn't have agreed. If the 3 superpowers really wanted to search the sword sect, regardless of the results, the sword sect would lose face. Jian Tian would never agree to such a thing. Brother Long, don't go too far. Jian Tian's face turned cold instantly. This time, the 3 superpowers weren't the only ones that had come. There were also over 100,000 spectators. With so many people watching, the sword sect couldn't afford to lose face. Jian Tian, we don't have time to play with you. Hand over Longao, and we'll leave immediately. Otherwise, we'll flatten the sword sect today. Flatten the sword sect. Hearing Long Tian's words, the surrounding people immediately went into an uproar. They were all incomparably shocked. The sword sect's strength was obvious. It was impossible to flatten it. Even if the 3 superpowers worked together, they wouldn't be able to do so without paying a heavy price. Were the 3 superpowers really that confident? When all the disciples of the sword sect heard this, they were incomparably furious. Long Tian's words meant that he didn't take the sword sect seriously at all. Even if they could tolerate it, they couldn't. Long Tian, do you really think the sword sect is a pushover? Just as Long Tian was about to lose control and attack, the myriad beast's ancestor stopped him. Long Tian was too reckless. The myriad beast ancestor didn't say it out loud, but his expression told Long Tian that he was very dissatisfied with this matter. After all, the myriad beast ancestor was the strongest among the 3. Even Long Tian and Tong Zun didn't dare to casually provoke the myriad beast ancestor. Take a step back. Long Tian cursed in his heart. 3 years later, when his cultivation broke through to the peak of the martial way, not to mention 1 myriad beast ancestor, even if there were 10,000 myriad beast ancestors, he would not care about them. Even now, no one knew that Long Tian and Tong Zun had already devoured the core energy. Brother Murong, we've known each other for 10,000 years. There's no need for us to hide anything. Everyone knows that Longao is in the sword sect. Even if you try to hide it now, I'm afraid you won't be able to. Jian Tian's expression was gloomy. What the myriad beast's ancestor had said was true. Even so, what could he do? Did he really have to hand over Longao? Brother Sure, this is the sword sect. You're not putting the sword sect in your eyes at all. What would you do if it was you? Anger. The myriad beast ancestor was extremely clear that if it was him, or the myriad beast sect, they definitely wouldn't let this matter go. But in this situation, even if the sword sect was unhappy, what could they do? A wise man submits to circumstances. These simple words had already expressed the myriad beast's ancestors' intentions. It was very simple. If you don't take the bait and hand over Longao, then I'm sorry, but the sword sect probably won't be able to resist the joint forces of the 3 great forces. 1 Longao was able to attract all the experts of the 3 super forces to come. Longao could be considered to be unprecedented in history. Jian Tian wasn't a fool. If he didn't hand over Longao, the 3 superpowers wouldn't let this matter go. Once a battle broke out, the sword sect would most likely be destroyed. Based on the attitude of the 3 superpowers, they wouldn't rest until they killed Longao. Even if they had to suffer heavy losses, they wouldn't hesitate. Hand over Longao? Or not hand over Longao? For a moment, Jian Tian didn't know what to do. As the ancestor of the sword sect, no matter what happened, he had to first think of the sect's interests. He couldn't sacrifice the entire sect for a single person. If he did that, wouldn't he become a sinner of the sword sect? Jian Tian didn't say anything because he didn't know what to do in this situation. After all, the sword sect's interests were the most important. Even if he wanted to side with Longao, would the others agree? Brother Murong, I'll give you one last chance. I'll count to 3. If you still don't hand over Longao, we'll have to fight. 1. Silence. Everyone held their breaths, waiting to see what Jian Tian would choose. 2. Everyone in the sword sect looked at Jian Tian, hoping that he would hand over Longao and not absorb the entire sword sect. 3. Kill. Jian Tian insisted on not handing over Longao. For the sake of Jianling, the Myriad Beast sect was willing to pay any price to find Longao. Even if they had to suffer heavy losses, they wouldn't hesitate. Just as the battle was about to break out, a lazy voice sounded. Longao is here. Shortly after, Longao's figure slowly appeared. His face was calm, and he wasn't afraid of the 3 superpowers. Chapter 1453. His face was calm. Longao did not leave the sword sect for the sake of the 3 superpowers. The 3 superpowers had only one goal in mind, and that was to deal with Longao. According to normal logic, Longao would not dare to show himself. 1 against 3. Other than the godly mathematician and Tian Dao, how many people in the Tianwu continent could fight 1 against 3? Longao could not do it. Everyone was certain that Longao was afraid of the 3 superpowers and did not dare to show himself. But what was the result? Longao did not show the slightest fear. Was Longao not afraid of death? Just this courage alone made many people admire Longao, because no one dared to casually show themselves in front of the 3 superpowers. Longao. He waved his hand. Longao did not feel the slightest anger or dissatisfaction towards Jian Tian's difficulties. Because the sword sect had already done enough. Even if it was him, he might not be able to do it. He was more or less grateful to Jian Tian, Murongguina, and Yi Xian. Because of this, Longao did not want to implicate the sword sect, nor did he want the sword sect to be destroyed by the 3 superpowers. Senior Jian Tian, I will always remember this kindness. Longao used his spiritual consciousness to send a message to Jian Tian. Senior Jian Tian, I have a favor to ask of you. No matter what happens to me, I hope that you will seal the sword chi space. No matter who it is, no one is allowed to enter the sword chi space. Since things had already reached this stage, Jian Tian was very clear that he was powerless to protect Longao. For the sake of the sword sect, he had to give up Longao. With the 3 superpowers' power, Jian Tian did not have the slightest confidence that he could fight 1 against 3. Longao, don't worry. Unless the sword sect and I perish, no one will be able to enter the sword energy space. Longao trusted Jian Tian. Otherwise, he wouldn't have walked out. Thank you. After saying this, Longao didn't continue. Looking coldly at the people in front of him, especially the 3 people standing at the front, Longao suddenly laughed. Longao smiled? What did that mean? When everyone saw Longao laughing at this time, they seemed to be a little dumbfounded. They didn't know what Longao was laughing at. Was Longao not worried at all? Good job. Someone in the crowd sighed. Before that person could react, he was killed by Longhang in a single move. The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. The surroundings immediately quieted down. No matter who it was, no one dared to say another word. Right now, the 3 superforces were like rabid dogs, biting whoever they saw. The more the 3 superpowers behaved like this, the more the people looked down on them. However, due to the 3 superpowers' power, no one dared to say anything. Longao, you devoured the heaven and earth's spiritual vein. How should we settle this score? Longao sneered in his heart. How could Longao not know the myriad beast's ancestors' intentions? Since one beast's old ancestor didn't mention Bai Ling, Longao wouldn't either. After all, the fewer people who knew about Bai Ling, the better. Otherwise, he would be in trouble. Longao and Wan Beast's old ancestor each had their own thoughts. Tong Zun took a step forward, looked at Jian Tian, and said, "Brother Murong, this has nothing to do with you. It's between us and Longao." Tong Zun's meaning was clear. Since Longao had appeared, Jian Tian knew that he didn't have to do this. Otherwise, the sword sect would be at a disadvantage. He was helpless. His heart was filled with anger, but under such circumstances, there was nothing he could do. He waved his hand, and everyone in the sword sect took 10 steps back, leaving only Longao alone. Fighting alone. Longao wasn't afraid at all, looking coldly at the tens of thousands of people in front of him. Suddenly, Longao smiled and said, "Wan Beast's old ancestor, I devoured your heaven and earth's spiritual vein. As for the reason, you and I both know. There's no need to hide it. I'm alone, and you have so many people. Don't you think it's a little overkill if you want to kill me? Gutsy. Cut the crap. If you want to fight, let's fight. I want to ask, are you guys going to fight one-on-one or take turns?" Taking turns? Isn't that a slap to the 3 superpowers' face? In front of so many people, even if the 3 superpowers were beaten to death, they wouldn't do that. Long Tian sneered and mocked. "Longao, there's no need to take turns to kill you. I'd like to see how you're going to leave this place today." In truth, the 3 of them weren't completely confident. After all, they had learned from their mistakes. Every time, Longao had used spatial teleportation to escape. If Longao could successfully escape this time, the 3 superpowers would lose all face. Therefore, no matter what happened, they couldn't let Longao leave this place alive. Both Long Tian and Tong Zun wanted to kill Longao. As for Wan Beast's old ancestor, he had another intention. To be honest, Wan Beast's old ancestor didn't care about Longao's life or death. He only cared about one thing, and that was Jianling. Jianling, who had reached the peak of martial Dao, could help him break through to the peak of martial Dao. Who should he send for a one-on-one fight? Should the 3 of them fight personally? If that was the case, then regardless of whether they won or lost this battle, the 3 of them would have lost. This was because the 3 of them were already the strongest cultivators on the continent 10,000 years ago. Anyone else could fight, but the 3 of them couldn't. My cultivation has already reached the Divine King realm. How about this? We'll win 2 out of 3. You can send your Divine Emperors. If I win 3 out of 3, all of you can get lost. If I lose one of the 3, I won't need you to fight, I'll kill myself immediately. If it was someone else who said that, the 3 superpowers would snort disdainfully and look down on them. Except for Longao. He was a man-man with a lot of variables, a man-man who could counterattack time and time again. Although Longao was only a god-king martial artist, his strength was very strong. Even a god-emperor martial artist might not be his opponent. He cursed fiercely in his heart because Longao was obviously full of confidence. He was shameless. Who was the shameless one? It was up to each person to see who was the shameless one. "Don't tell me you don't dare?" Longao said disdainfully. The surrounding crowd looked at them with disdain. The 3 superpowers obviously didn't dare to accept Longao's challenge. Wasn't this a slap in the face? The 3 of them looked very gloomy. They never thought that Longao would take the first step, which made them very passive. If they knew that this would happen, they would have taken the initiative and not given Longao any chance to speak. Chapter 1454. Longao, you're about to die, and you're still trying to play tricks? The 3 of them wouldn't act rashly if they weren't confident. Longao's suggestion of a best of 3 was obviously beneficial to them. If they lost, wouldn't they be the laughing stock of the world? Longao would definitely die. The surrounding crowd despised the 3 superpowers. However, due to the strength of the 3 superpowers, no one dared to say anything. They cursed in their hearts. "I dare not say it out loud. Why do you have to do this?" Without giving the 3 of them a chance to speak, Longao continued. "If you want to fight, then fight. If not, get lost. This battle was unavoidable. Bai Ling was in the sword chi space. As long as Jian Tian and the other two didn't say anything, no one would know where Bai Ling was. Without any worries, Longao could also be considered to have heaved a sigh of relief. Since this battle was unavoidable, why bother? Longao didn't want to waste any time. Hearing Longao's words, everyone in the surroundings was greatly shocked because no one would have thought that Longao would still dare to do such a thing in a situation like that. If they didn't personally see it, they would truly find it hard to believe. Unbelievable. Myriad Beast's old ancestor, Long Tian and Tong Zun looked at each other. They could see the shock in each other's eyes. Longao, I'll give you a chance now. Say it. Longao wanted to see how shameless the three of them were going to be. Longao, 1 hour. As long as you can hold on for 1 hour under everyone's attacks, you can leave. From then on, the grudge between you and us will be written off. What do you think? F***ck hearing Long Tian's words, the surrounding crowd cursed in their hearts. Shameless. They had seen shameless people before, but they had never seen such shameless people. Long Tian and the others were shameless to the extreme. If it weren't for the three superpowers' strength, they would have started cursing. They were obviously bullying Longao. He was obviously shameless to the extreme. Longao was speechless. He already knew that Long Tian and the others were shameless, but he had never imagined that they would be so shameless as to openly gang up on him. Could it be that they were all shameless? Disdain was disdain, but Longao was very clear that the initiative was in the other party's hands. The chances of winning this battle were close to 0, and the chances of leaving this place were also close to 0. Longao could clearly sense that the three superforces had already interfered with the spatial fluctuations in the surroundings. Although he could use spatial teleportation, it seemed a little difficult to enter the Dragon Seal space. Furthermore, Longao also didn't plan on entering the Dragon Seal space, because this debt would be settled sooner or later, so it was better to settle it sooner rather than later. Longao, do you dare to accept my challenge? He smiled contemptuously. Longao said mockingly, whether I accept the challenge or not, the result will be the same. That was indeed the case. It was obvious that the three superpowers were shameless. Long Tian and the others definitely knew this, but the three of them pretended not to know. The three of them waved their hands at the same time. In the next moment, Long family. Behind the Martial Artists Alliance and Wanshou's sect, 30 Emperor God martial artists dashed out. Their cultivation had already reached the peak of the Emperor God realm. If they joined forces, unless it was a Nirvana realm martial artist, who else could fight against them? Too shameless. The three superpowers had already lost their face by bullying him with numbers. Now, they were even more shameless. 30 peak Emperor God martial artists against Longao alone. Was this battle fair? There was no principle of fairness. Longao wasn't afraid at all. Instead, he smiled and asked, I want to know, if I kill these people, will I be able to leave? Arrogant. They had seen arrogant people, but they had never seen such an arrogant person. Now, everyone finally knew why Longao dared to make trouble for the Martial Artists Alliance, Wanshou's sect, and Long family. With such a crazy and arrogant attitude, how could he not dare to make trouble for the three superpowers? The three of them were surprised. They didn't expect Longao to ask such a question. Because in the eyes of the three of them, if 30 peak Emperor God warriors attacked together, as long as Longao didn't use the spatial divine tool to leave, how could he resist such a joint attack? He would definitely die. If it was someone else who asked this question, the three of them would definitely snort and ignore it. But what about Longao? The calmer Longao was, the more unsure the three of them were. Could it be that Longao had something to rely on? They couldn't take the risk. Under such circumstances, if they took the risk and allowed Longao to escape or kill these Emperor God martial artists, not to mention Longao's life or death, the three superpowers wouldn't be able to bear the loss of face. No matter what, they had to make sure nothing went wrong. Longao, if you can really kill these people, I can promise you that we won't attack the Dragon Valley in the future. What do you think? Shaking his head, Longao chuckled. Not only Longao, everyone in the surroundings chuckled in their hearts. Everyone knew that the three superpowers couldn't break through the Dragon Valley's energy shield even when they joined forces. The three superpowers said this because they couldn't do it themselves. Whether Longao really killed these people, the three superpowers would still attack him. At this moment, before the crowd could react, Longao took a big stride and his entire body was already flying towards the 30 people. Before he arrived, the terrifying aura of heaven and earth had already fiercely suppressed them. This was because Longao knew that with his strength, not to mention fighting 1 against 30, even if it was a one-on-one situation, it was still unknown whether he could win. Because of this, he had to rely on the aura of heaven and earth to suppress the 30 people. Only then would he have a chance to attack. The aura of heaven and earth was a powerful aura that Nirvana Realm martial artists possessed. Longao could use the aura of heaven and earth to increase his battle strength. But soon, the aura of heaven and earth that Longao released was suppressed by the aura of heaven and earth released by Long Tian and the others. Long Tian's voice sounded. Longao, the aura of heaven and earth can't appear in a battle of supreme Tao. F***CK. Longao couldn't take the shamelessness of Long Tian and the others anymore and cursed. Long Tian's shamelessness had soared to the extreme. Even heaven and earth couldn't stop it. Everyone in the surroundings despised them to the extreme, but they didn't dare to say anything. Even so, the reputation of Long Tian and the others had been completely ruined. Being shameless wasn't scary. What was scary was being shameless. Long Tian and the other two were shameless. Not to mention being shameless, they didn't even care about their reputation. Suppressing the endless anger in his heart, Longao's speed soared to the extreme. Although the space around him was disturbed, he could still teleport due to the upgrade of his teleportation skill. 1 against 30. Regardless of whether Longao won or lost, in everyone's eyes, Longao had already won. Chapter 1455. Kill. Longao would not go easy on them. Longao knew that in a situation where it was either death or destruction, being merciful to one's enemy was the cruelest way to be merciful to oneself. If one of them died, the other would die. Under normal circumstances, it was simply impossible for Longao's strength to kill 30 divine emperor martial artists. Supreme 4 realms. The gap between a supreme god and an emperor god was too big. It was like an insurmountable gap. The power of 30 emperor gods working together was imaginable. Everyone's eyes were glued to the battle in front of them. 1 against 30. This kind of battle was rarely seen in 100 years. If the 30 emperor gods managed to kill Longao, they wouldn't have any good intentions in this battle. At most, they would say that the 3 super forces were shameless for bullying Longao with numbers. It wasn't like they would lose anything. But if Longao won the battle, the significance would be completely different. In this battle, not only did one person defeat 30 people, but it was also a god king defeating 30 god emperors. Since ancient times, who could achieve such a feat? Everyone started to look forward to the battle. Without exception, everyone was looking forward to the winner of this battle to be Longao, and not the 30 god emperor martial artists. If Longao wins, what should we do? Long Tian, Tong Zun, and the Wanshou sect were communicating with each other using their spiritual consciousness. Hearing Tong Zun's worries, Long Tian and the Wanshou sect snorted. Although they were wary of Longao, they didn't believe that Longao could defeat 30 Longao alone. No one believed in this battle, let alone them. Brother Tong, you're worrying too much. Was he worrying too much? Tong Zun didn't know why, but he had a bad feeling. After all, Longao wasn't an ordinary person. He could cause trouble for the Long family, the Martial Artists Alliance, and the Wanshou sect, and escape unscathed. Who would believe that he didn't have some skills? However, since the two of them didn't believe it, Tong Zun knew that it was useless to say more. At the other side, Murongguena and Jian Tian looked grave as they watched Longao fight against 30 Emperor gods. They really hoped that Longao would emerge victorious. Ancestor, what do you think are Longao's chances of winning this battle? 100%. 100%? Hearing the old ancestor's words, Murongguena was shocked. 1 against 30, and Longao was only a god king while the 30 opponents were all peak god emperors. Could Longao win? Murongguena definitely did not believe it. Jian Tian's face was full of confidence. He smiled and said, "You should know Longao's character better than me. If he wasn't confident, would Longao accept the challenge? Will they take the initiative to attack?" That being said, but no matter what, Murongguena still sighed. After all, Longao's strength was there for all to see. Could it be that Longao could really emerge victorious? The battle between Longao and the 30 Emperor gods continued to escalate. With the help of the speed of space teleportation, Longao was like a gust of wind. The 30 of them were anxious to death. North, south, east, west, all directions were blocked. If they were to fight head-on, Longao would definitely lose. Killer move. Longao didn't waste any time. In the next second, his reincarnation doppelganger appeared beside him, holding the Nirvana Divine Bow in his hand. With a few schwa 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 sounds, the arrow light flashed. Before anyone could react, or even scream, the 30 people who were still alive and kicking were all swallowed up by the arrow light. They were devoured in an instant. Seeing that only Longao was left, and that his reincarnation avatar had returned to Longao's Dantian, the surrounding crowd was dumbfounded. Was what happened just now real? After fiercely swallowing their own saliva, the gazes that everyone in the surroundings looked at Longao had completely changed. Regardless of Longao's cultivation realm, the fact that he could fight against 30 people and devour them in one move was enough to show how powerful Longao was. Powerful. He could only be described with one word: incomparably powerful. Long Tian, Tong Zun, and Myriad Beast Ancestor looked at each other and saw a trace of shock in each other's eyes. Because even the 3 of them didn't expect Longao to be able to kill 30 peak stage deities hall martial artists in an instant. Seeing that Longao had killed 30 people, Murongguena and Jian Tian were delighted. Longao had won this battle. Longao, you? Waving his hand. Without giving Long Tian any chance to speak, Longao sneered and said, "I have killed all of them. I hope you remember what you said just now. From now on, no matter who it is, the 3 of you can't touch my Dragon Valley." Longao was also looking for a way out for himself. The reason was simple. According to Xiling, the sword realm that she had set up could only last the Dragon Valley for 3 years. In other words, if he couldn't break through to the Nirvana realm after 3 years, once the secret of the sword realm was discovered by the 3 superforces, the Dragon Valley's fate could be imagined. Because of this, Longao wasn't willing to take the risk. If the 3 superforces didn't touch his family, then even if he couldn't break through to the Nirvana realm after 3 years, as long as his family was safe, he wouldn't have any worries. Even if the 3 of them were unwilling and angry, they had already said what they had said. Were they really going to go back on their words in front of so many people? Long Tian and the other 2 weren't fools. They wouldn't embarrass themselves like this. Helpless, Long Tian nodded and said, "All right, Longao, you're lucky. But I'd like to see how you're going to defend yourself." Just as Long Tian finished speaking, Long Hang's figure appeared. Seeing this situation, everyone understood what Long Tian meant. Everyone was very clear about Long Hang's strength. He was a Nirvana Realm warrior and had been in the Nirvana Realm for a long time. Even if Longao was powerful and could kill 30 god emperors, so what? At the end of the day, the Supreme Divine Way Realm and the Nirvana Realm weren't on the same level. A Nirvana Realm warrior could kill a Supreme Divine Way warrior in an instant. Humans could no longer stop Long Tian and the Long family's shamelessness. Longao, the grudge between you and me has to end today. End? Shaking his head, Longao said sarcastically, "Long Hang, when I first joined the Long family, you've always wanted to kill me. If it wasn't for you, I would still be a disciple of the Long family." Hearing this, there was an uproar in the surroundings. Even Long Tian's expression became increasingly gloomy. This was because Long Ao's talent and potential, including his strength, was obvious to all. If such a talent were to stay in the Longsha clan, it would only be beneficial to the Longsha clan. But what was the result? Just because Long Heng wanted to kill Long Ao for no reason, he pushed Long Ao out. Although Long Tian was furious, he wouldn't blame Long Heng under such circumstances. Chapter 1456. Long Heng's face was also very gloomy. "Cut the crap. Today, our grudge must be settled." Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Long Heng kept telling himself that he could not lose. Long Ao and Long Heng didn't say anything. They looked at each other. Their fighting spirit surged as they fought against each other. The battle had not yet begun, but their fighting spirit had already soared to a certain level. Long Ao really dared to accept the challenge? Everyone was a little shocked because no one thought that Long Ao would choose to fight Long Heng at this time. But could Long Ao really not accept the challenge? Under such circumstances, even if Long Ao was not willing to accept the challenge, it was impossible. A Nirvana realm martial artist against a Divine King martial artist, the result could be imagined. Everyone was not optimistic about Long Ao. They sighed. The three super forces were all powerful and could be said to be the top super forces in the Tianwu continent. When had they ever been so shameless? Only this time, the three super forces seemed to have agreed to be shameless. Die. There was no sound. Long Heng's lips gently spat out a word. It was the so-called die. Such a rare opportunity, Long Heng would not give up. With a stride, Long Heng's figure rushed out. As expected of a Nirvana realm martial artist, just his speed alone was like lightning. Long Heng was very clear that Long Ao had the chi of heaven and earth. It was almost impossible for him to rely on the chi of heaven and earth to suppress Long Ao. In that case, Long Heng did not use the chi of heaven and earth at all. Long Heng was full of confidence. If it was a one-on-one fight, not to mention one Long Ao, even if there were 10,000 Long Ao, he would not put them in his eyes. In the blink of an eye, the two bodies had collided fiercely. As expected, their realms were not on the same level. In less than 3 moves, Long Ao was forced to retreat again and again. If it were not for the spatial teleportation, Long Ao would not have been able to dodge 3 moves. Seeing this situation, everyone broke out in a cold sweat for Long Ao. However, Long Ao's strength had once again shocked everyone in the surroundings. If it was any other God King expert facing a Nirvana realm martial artist, not to mention 3 moves, they might not even be able to dodge 1 move. Long Ao retreated again and again, feeling a little anxious. Going on like this was not a solution. If he were to let his guard down, the consequences would be unimaginable. How should he fight? "Master, the Black Tortoise armor has been completed." Just as Long Ao was about to succumb, Long Fu's voice sounded in his mind. He was overjoyed. According to Xiling and Long Fu's estimates, the Black Tortoise armor would take about a month to complete. Less than a month had passed. Although he didn't know how Long Fu had done it, Long Ao was filled with anticipation for the Black Tortoise armor. The Black Tortoise armor was refined using the blood and shell of the divine beast, the Black Tortoise. Its defensive power was extremely terrifying. According to Xiling and Long Fu, even a Nirvana realm martial artist would not be able to break through the Black Tortoise armor's defensive power, unless it was a Nirvana realm martial artist at the peak of the Nirvana rebirth realm, such as the Beast Ancestor. Even the Beast Ancestor would not be able to break through the Black Tortoise armor unless he attacked continuously for 5 moves. The Black Tortoise armor was formless, and no one could tell. In other words, Long Ao was wearing the Black Tortoise armor at this moment. Instantly, Long Ao's confidence skyrocketed. Using his fingers as a sword, his sword aura was unstoppable. Seeing Long Ao's attainments in the sword principle, everyone in the sword sect felt a little helpless. After all, Longao was not a disciple of the sword sect. What did it mean to have such attainments in the sword principle? A genius? In front of a super genius like Longao, everyone would feel ashamed. Longao had been cultivating the incomplete sword principle and the god-slaying sword technique. The combination of the two was very powerful. You're courting death. Seeing Longao's fierce counterattack, Longheng sneered in his heart. Under such circumstances, Longao would die without a doubt. Seeing the opportunity, Longheng threw a punch that landed squarely on Longao's chest. Under normal circumstances, a Nirvana Realm martial artist's full-strength punch was enough to kill a peak Emperor God warrior, not to mention Longheng's strength. The 5 realms of the Nirvana Realm. From the lowest to the highest, they were enlightenment of heaven and earth, oneness of heaven and man, heavenly psycho-reproduction, nirvana, and rebirth. Longheng's cultivation had already broken through the Nirvana realm. He was only one step away from the so-called Nirvana rebirth realm. Even so, Longheng's strength had already reached the top of the martial Tao pyramid. Everyone felt sorry for Longao because Longheng's punch was enough to take Longao's life. There was no exception. But the result? Longao was unscathed as if nothing had happened. What was going on? Looking at the battle in front of them, everyone was a little dumbfounded because no one knew how Longao did it. After all, Longheng's strength was there for all to see. With Longao's strength, how could he withstand it? Longao was also incomparably shocked, because he did not expect Longheng to be so powerful. Although Longheng's punch did not break through his defense, his chest still faintly hurt, as if he had been smashed by a 10,000-kilogram boulder. Fortunately, he was protected by the black tortoise armor. Otherwise, that punch alone would have taken his life. It was indeed the black tortoise armor that was refined by the divine beast Black Tortoise. Even if its defense was not as strong as the real divine beast Black Tortoise, its defense was still terrifying. Even a Nirvana Realm warrior would not be able to break through the Black Tortoise armor's defense. Longheng was also dumbfounded as he stood there, looking at Longao who was unscathed. Until now, Longheng was still in disbelief. He did not expect Longao to be able to withstand his punch and be unscathed. Was this real? Longheng did not believe it. He would rather die than believe it. The Black Tortoise armor! Both Tong Zun and Long Tian were surprised when they heard Wan Shou Ancestor's words. They knew what Wan Shou Ancestor meant. The Black Tortoise armor. Could it be that Longao had killed the divine beast Black Tortoise and refined it into the Black Tortoise armor? Brother Shi, what should we do now? Even Wan Shou Ancestor did not expect that Longao had refined the Black Tortoise armor. Even if Longao had obtained the divine beast Black Tortoise, it would be impossible for him to refine it into the Black Tortoise armor. Wan Shou Ancestor had obtained the divine beast Black Tortoise for 10,000 years, but he still could not refine it into the Black Tortoise armor. Otherwise, he would not have waited until now. In the end, it was Longao who benefited from it. His heart was filled with endless anger and unwillingness. However, Wan Shou Ancestor knew that Longao was protected by the Black Tortoise armor. Unless they took action personally, it would be difficult for anyone to break through the divine beast Black Tortoise's defense. However, under such circumstances, could the 3 of them take action? Chapter 1457. The 3 of us can't take action. Tong Zun and Long Tian nodded in agreement. The 3 superforces had already thrown the alliance into disgrace. If the 3 of them had to take action personally, how could they face the world? That was the reason. The 3 of them looked at each other and saw a trace of determination in each other's eyes. Even so, Longao had to die. In fact, the 3 of them were more or less confident. So what if Longao had the Black Tortoise armor? Could a divine king really contend against a Nirvana Realm cultivator with the help of the Black Tortoise armor? It was basically impossible. If they were one level apart, they might be able to counterattack. However, the difference in strength between Longao and Longheng was a little too big. It was a little too big. Even if Longao could withstand Long Hang's attack, it was impossible for him to counterattack. Longao, you really surprised me. Really? The corner of Longao's mouth slowly curled into a sneer. He looked at the myriad beast ancestor and the other two and suddenly said, Taking turns to fight will waste too much time. Why don't all of you come at me together? F***ck hearing Longao's words, everyone's jaws dropped. No one expected Longao to say that. Taking turns to fight? At the very least, taking turns to fight would give them a chance of survival, although it was slim. However, if they attacked together, Longao would probably be trampled to death in an instant. He would not have the slightest chance of survival. Not to mention the others, even Long Tian and the other two were a little surprised. Longao was so fearless. Did he have something to rely on? Coupled with the previous lesson, the three of them were more or less unsure. They did not know if Longao could leave with the help of a spatial artifact under such a strong spatial disturbance. It was better to be safe than sorry. What if Longao really left with the help of a spatial artifact? If they could still let Longao escape like this, their face this time could be considered to have lost a lot of face. Long Hang, come back! Ancestor! Long Tian waved his hand and said in an extremely cold voice. Come back! The elder ancestor's dignity was there. Even if Long Hang was unhappy and unwilling, he did not dare to contradict the elder ancestor. If the elder ancestor killed him out of anger, where could he go to reason? Longao, wait a moment, I will tear you into pieces. I'll wait. He did not take Long Hang seriously. Now, with the protection of the black tortoise armor, even Long Hang would not be able to break through his defense. Not only that, he also had spatial teleportation. With the combination of spatial teleportation and black tortoise armor, even though his cultivation was only at the Divine King realm, Nirvana realm martial artists couldn't do anything to him. Long Hang reluctantly retreated. In this battle, the winds and clouds had changed. If they did not see it with their own eyes, they would not believe it. Until now, there was a lot of discussion. No one knew how Longao did it. Longao, I have to admit that you are arrogant and courageous. Without giving Long Tian any chance to speak, Longao directly interrupted and said, Long Tian, back then, you single-handedly established the huge Long clan. If you didn't divide it into ranks, I'd believe that the current Long clan would be the head of the 10 forces. Long Tian's face was ugly, but he had nothing to say. A talent like Longao was wasted. There was indeed a drawback in the division of ranks. Since you want to fight, why talk so much nonsense? I don't like to fight. Come at me together. Longao stood alone in the middle of the crowd. He was dressed in black and his blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. He was like a god of death, looking down on everyone. Let's not talk about who will win or lose this battle. Longao's courage alone was unparalleled in the world. Since that is the case, you will fulfill Longao's wish. Shameless. The three of them were already shameless, let alone shameless. Because things had already reached this point, the three of them did not want any accidents to happen, so Longao must die. They, the so-called old ancestors and master, could not take action, but it did not mean that others could not. Moreover, Longao asked them to come at him together. Would they not fulfill his wish? Tens of thousands of people would not all flock together. After all, Longao was only one person. Even so, the three super forces mobilized hundreds of people. These hundreds of people were all supreme gods. Among them, there were no less than 50 god emperors. What kind of concept was that? Although everyone was optimistic about Longao, 1 against 100. Unless Longao was in the Nirvana realm, he would not be able to survive this battle. Not only that, the three super forces were shameless to the extreme. Not only did they mobilize hundreds of supreme gods, but they also mobilized 1 Nirvana realm expert each, including Long Hang who had not won yet. 3 Nirvana realm martial artists, and more than 100 supreme divine Tao martial artists. Even an ordinary Nirvana realm martial artist wouldn't be able to contend against such a joint force, let alone a puny divine king. Could Longao really survive? Kill! The three of them issued the order in unison. Hundreds of people swarmed up and surrounded Longao from all directions. From afar, one could not see the battle situation clearly. They could only see a sea of people. As for whether Longao was alive or dead, no one knew. In the midst of the siege, Longao did not panic and faced the situation calmly. With the protection of the black tortoise armor, unless the 3,000 beasts' old ancestor personally took action, no one could break through his defense. With the help of spatial teleportation, it would not be easy to kill him. Longao was not a fool. He would not throw away his life in vain. He was looking for an opportunity to leave. As long as he left, the three superforces would undoubtedly follow him. Even if the 1,000 beasts' old ancestor was killed, he would not expect that he had already sent Bai Ling into the Sword Chi space. The three superforces would certainly hunt him down. As long as Bai Ling was safe, it would be fine. In order to kill one less, Longao directly summoned his reincarnation doppelganger and pulled the silent death divine bow. In the four directions of north, south, east, and west, not one was left. In just a few seconds, there were no less than 10 supreme divine Dao martial artists were destroyed. Even so, the remaining people were like moths to a flame. One after another, they attacked Longao as if they were not afraid of death. In this way, Longao and his reincarnation doppelganger were forcibly separated. In this way, Longao was gradually unable to withstand the attacks. He was hit from time to time. If it was not for the black tortoise armor, he would have fallen by now. Chapter 1458. They had to admit that the black tortoise armor's defense was really strong. Not to mention ordinary martial artists, even a Nirvana realm martial artist would not be able to hurt him. 1 against 100. Not only did Longao not show any signs of defeat, but he also used the strength of his reincarnation avatars to kill a third of the hundreds of people who were still alive. What did that mean? Everyone was extremely shocked in their hearts, because Longao's variables were simply too great. At this moment, everyone finally understood why the three superforces were doing this. They believed that anyone who encountered such an unpredictable and talented enemy would do the same. Eliminate the source of trouble. The faces of the myriad beast ancestor, Long Tian, and Tong Zun began to turn gloomy because the three of them had never expected Longao to successfully refine the black tortoise armor at this time. According to their previous thoughts, killing Longao would be a piece of cake. But the result? They had already fought 3 battles, taking turns to fight and besieging Longao, but they still could not kill him. What do you two think? Longao is using the black tortoise armor and the spatial artifact. Even Long Hang and the others would find it difficult to kill Longao. It seems that we have to increase our interference. Tong Zun and the myriad beast ancestor nodded in agreement. The three of them did not expect Longao to be able to use the spatial artifact even after the three of them had joined forces to interfere with the spatial fluctuations. It was unbelievable. Increase their interference. The three of them increased their interference, and it was effective. Longao, who was using spatial teleportation to constantly change his position, suddenly realized that he could no longer use spatial teleportation. He was shocked. Before Longao could react, he was hit by Long Hang again and was sent flying. In the air, Longao forcefully turned around. Under such circumstances, Longao did not dare to relax in the slightest. Otherwise, even with the protection of the black tortoise armor, he would probably be torn apart by the surrounding people. Longao could no longer hold on. Seeing this, the 3 superforces were overjoyed. Take advantage of the situation. Long Hang, of course, would not give up on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He flew out with Longao. Before he arrived, his murderous aura had already arrived. Innate ability, Dragon Roar. When the dragon's roar rang out, the flow of space around them slowed down significantly. Many people's bodies were restricted. Even Long Hang and the other two Nirvana Realm warriors were locked down by the dragon's roar when they were not paying attention. He was obviously a little surprised. Longao's innate divine abilities were no secret in the martial heaven continent. Even so, Long Tian and the other two looked at each other, and saw a trace of shock in each other's eyes. Because the three of them could clearly feel that the flow of time around them had changed. Could it be a time martial technique? Or a time artifact? Impossible. The three of them shook their heads at the same time. After all, there had never been a time martial technique, or a time artifact in Sky Martial Continent. It should be impossible. Thousand Beast Ancestor and Tong Zun both knew what Long Tian meant. Tong Zun smiled and said, "Brother Long, you are thinking too much. Time artifacts and time martial techniques, legend has it that they only exist in the outside world. In our Sky Martial Continent, even the Heavenly Tao might not have such a time artifact and time martial technique. Although that is the case, I believe that you have also sensed that Longao's martial technique can change the flow of time. If you say that this martial technique is not a time martial technique, even if you beat me to death, I will not believe it." Hearing this, Thousand Beasts Ancestor and Tong Zun did not say anything. Because the two of them knew what Long Tian meant. Now that they thought about it, if it was not a time martial technique, how could Longao change the flow of time? After all, even with their strength, they were unable to change the flow of time. They believed that even the Heavenly Tao was unable to do this. Then how did Longao do it? If it was really a time martial technique, then the three of them were extremely happy. Without exception, if the three of them could obtain a time martial technique, it would be a great help to their strength. Don't kill Longao. Because of the so-called time martial skill, the three of them transmitted their spiritual sense at the same time. When Long Hang and the others received the spiritual sense transmission, they seemed to be very surprised. They didn't know what happened to the three old ancestors in this situation. Why did they suddenly stop killing Longao? Chapter 1459. Longao used his time shurkill technique to accelerate his speed. Everyone in the surroundings felt their bodies stop moving, and some even fell back. What the hell happened? Seizing the rare opportunity, Longao and his reincarnation avatar began a massacre. One punch, one kill. In addition, the reincarnation avatar used the silent divine bow. In just a few seconds, half of the remaining 50 people died. What kind of concept was this? Long Hang and the others did not dare to continue the battle and directly retreated. Longao won? Although he did not kill the remaining people, everyone was very clear that Longao had won this battle. Unbelievable. If they did not see it with their own eyes, who would believe such a thing? A God-King martial artist fought against hundreds of Supreme Realm experts, and 3 Nirvana Realm experts. 1 against 100, and still won. This seemed to be the first time in 10,000 years in the Tianwu continent that something like this had happened. No one had ever done it before, and no one would ever do it again. Longao smiled. Looking at all the people of the 3 superpowers in front of him, Longao suddenly smiled. Everyone knew what Longao's smile meant. He was mocking the 3 superpowers. Whether it was a battle of attrition or a siege, Longao had won. The 3 superpowers felt as if someone had slapped them hard in the face. Because no one had thought that Longao could win consecutively. It had not even been an hour. The 3 superpowers had lost 70 to 80 Supreme Realm experts, and even Nirvana Realm experts could not kill Longao. Longao's strength and variables could be imagined. Silence. There was a short silence in the Sword Sex Square. There was not the slightest sound, because everyone had not recovered from the battle just now. It was too shocking. It was too unbelievable. Fighting 1 against 100, under the situation where the difference in cultivation level was huge, Longao completely counterattacked. However, there were very few people who knew that Longao possessed the time flow. Most likely, only the numerous Nirvana Realm martial artists knew about it. It was because of that. The gazes of all the Nirvana realm martial artists looking at Longao, other than anger, there was even more greed. They were greedy for the time martial technique. I have won. I wonder how this battle is going to end. Under normal circumstances, the three superpowers should have left dejectedly after failing to win the 3 battles. However, the 3 superpowers did not have the slightest intention of leaving. The 3 of them had their own ulterior motives. The Thousand Beast Ancestor wanted the time martial technique. Tong Zun and Jian Tian also wanted the time martial technique. Would the 3 of them leave? Longao, no matter what, today, we have to settle our grudges. The myriad beast ancestors' words were very clear. No matter what happened today, Longao must die, or the 3 superpowers must be wiped out. Was it possible? It's impossible. The strength of the 3 superforces was there for all to see. With Longao's strength alone, it was simply impossible to achieve this. Not to mention Longao, even a superpower like the Sword Sect would not be able to do it. Longao was not surprised at all. He had already guessed that the 3 superpowers would do that. After all, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The 3 superpowers would definitely not give up easily. Regarding the shamelessness of the 3 great superforces, Longao was also already used to it, and was not surprised. The Thousand Beasts Ancestor and the other 2 had the same thought. Anyway, they had lost their dignity this time. In that case, they would not let Longao go. A little bit of shamelessness was shameless. A little bit of shamelessness was shameless. Longao, if you are willing to surrender, maybe we will let you live. What do you think? It was the same trick again. Every time he heard the other party like this, Longao felt a deep pain in his balls. If he surrendered, would Long Tian, Tong Zun, and the Thousand Beasts Ancestor let him go? It was impossible. Only a fool would believe it. Longao smiled and said, "If you want to fight, then fight. If not, get lost." He ignored the 3 of them. Longao turned around and looked at Jian Tian and Muronguina, saying, "Senior Jian Tian, Muronguina, thank you for your help this time. I, Longao, will always remember this kindness." What did Longao mean? Did Longao really think that he could leave? Everyone sighed endlessly. Facing this kind of situation, perhaps only Longao had such strong self-confidence. Being surrounded by 3 superforces, even a Nirvana realm martial artist would not be able to escape. Jian Tian and Murong Feng Yan seemed to want to say something, but when the words reached their mouths, they didn't say anything. After all, they didn't protect Longao this time, and they were already very sorry for him. How could Longao not know what the 2 of them were thinking? Great kindness could not be thanked with words, but a little bit of kindness should be repaid with gushing spring. Everything was in silence. How could he leave smoothly? The surrounding space had been disturbed. It was almost impossible to enter the Dragon Seal space. However, Longao did not plan to enter the Dragon Seal space from the beginning. The reason was simple. Longao knew that once he entered the Dragon Seal space, the 3 superpowers would definitely think that he had not left. If that was the case, the consequences would be unimaginable if he was discovered by the 3 superpowers. The best way was to leave the Sword Sect and lure the 3 superpowers out of the Sword Sect. This way, Bai Ling would be safe. Even if the Thousand Beast Ancestor was beaten to death, he would never think that Bai Ling had already entered the Sword Chi space. How could he leave? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Longao was very clear in his heart that it would not be easy for him to leave. Without the help of spatial teleportation, it would become even more difficult. Let's do it. Long Tian and Tong Zun nodded their heads. The 3 of them had already decided that there was only one way to kill Longao. The 3 of them had to work together. Otherwise, the chances of Longao escaping were very high. Since things had already reached this stage, if Longao escaped, how could the 3 superpowers maintain their footing in the Sky Martial continent? Because of this, no matter what, Longao had to stay today. The 3 of them looked at each other, and saw a trace of determination in each other's eyes. Just as the three of them were about to take action, an unparalleled energy was suddenly released. Taboo energy! Tongzun and the rest's faces changed. The energy that enveloped them was the strongest taboo energy in the world. It was the energy that only a pinnacle expert of the martial Tao possessed. Could it be that a pinnacle expert of the martial Tao had descended? Everyone knew that in the sky martial continent, there were only two people who had broken through. One was the heavenly Tao, and the other was the divine mathematician. Since the heavenly Tao was not in the sky martial continent, didn't that mean that the one who had descended was the divine mathematician? Chapter 1460. No one dared to move under the taboo energy. Many people had already guessed that this expert was either the heavenly Taoist or the God Diviner. Only the Nirvana experts were 100% certain that this person wasn't the heavenly Taoist, but the God Diviner. The number one person of the martial heaven continent, the God Diviner. Greetings, God Diviner. Looking at the man who had suddenly appeared, the myriad beast ancestor raised his head and bowed respectfully. God Diviner? This man was the God Diviner? The number one person of the martial heaven continent? Hearing the myriad beast's patriarch and the others respectfully bowed, everyone was dumbfounded, including Longao. No one had thought that the number one person of the martial heaven continent, the God Diviner, would suddenly appear. Could it be that the God Diviner had come for Longao? Other than that, no one knew why the God Diviner would suddenly appear. He nodded indifferently. The God Diviner walked over to Longao and smiled. You really are troublesome. What did that mean? On the surface, the God Diviner seemed to be blaming Longao. But for some reason, many people had a strange feeling that the God Diviner's blame contained a trace of emotion. The God Diviner knew Longao? Let alone the others, even the myriad beast's patriarch and the others were shocked. They had never imagined that the God Diviner would speak to Longao as soon as he arrived. Just what was the relationship between the God Diviner and Longao? The three of them were extremely depressed. If the God Diviner's relationship with Longao really was good, then what would happen if the God Diviner attacked Longao? The God Diviner's power was obvious. Once he attacked, even if all of them worked together, they wouldn't be able to contend against him. The three of them kept telling themselves that even if the God Diviner knew Longao, they didn't necessarily have a good relationship. Otherwise, with the God Diviner's divine Tao, there was no way he wouldn't be able to calculate the enmity between them and Longao. The fact that Master God Diviner hadn't appeared before meant that the relationship between Longao and Master God Diviner wasn't very good. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people want to be despicable and deliberately ask for a beating, I can only accept the challenge. Neither servile nor overbearing. Longao did not feel the slightest bit of fear because of Master God Diviner. Even now, Longao had no idea what Master God Diviner was up to. Had he come to the Sword Sect to help him? Or to deal with himself? In the end, people still had to rely on themselves. I admire your character and courage, but I will not interfere in the grudge between you and them. Having already guessed it, Longao wasn't surprised in the slightest. Longao was well aware that if Master God Diviner had wanted to help him, he would have done so long ago. The myriad beast's ancestor and the other two heaved a sigh of relief when they heard this. Regardless of the relationship between Master God Diviner and Longao, since Master God Diviner had said that he wouldn't interfere in this matter, they believed that Master God Diviner wouldn't blame them even if they killed Longao. Before Longao could say anything, Master God Diviner suddenly turned around and said coldly, "You guys are a little too much." What did that mean? The three of them were confused by Master God Diviner's sudden words, but no one dared to say anything. After all, no one knew who Master God Diviner was, so they were a little confused. Using numbers to bully others in front of everyone, could it be that all of you have become so shameless? Everyone around was laughing, but they didn't dare to say anything. After all, the strength of the myriad beast's ancestor and the other two was obvious. Unless there was something wrong with their heads, they were tired of living. The grudge between you guys will eventually be resolved, but bullying with numbers is a little too much. Master God Diviner looked coldly at the three of them. The hearts of the myriad beast's ancestor and the other two thumped. Was Master God Diviner going to deal with them? They were terrified to the extreme. At this moment, Master God Diviner continued, "For 1 year, the three of you are not allowed to deal with Longao. Those who violate this rule will be destroyed by me." Not allowed to deal with Longao for 1 year. After hearing Longao's decision, there was no doubt that Master God Diviner was obviously siding with Longao. If that was the case, what was the relationship between Master God Diviner and Longao? Why would Master God Diviner help Longao so much? The myriad beast's ancestor and the other two cursed fiercely in their hearts. Under normal circumstances, 1 year would pass in the blink of an eye. Only the current situation was different. Longao's variability and talent were too strong. In a year's time, no one could be sure how far Longao could grow in a year's time. Longao's current cultivation base was only at the God King realm, but he was able to resist a Nirvana expert's attack. Although he had the Xuanwu battle armor, it wasn't hard to see that Longao's strength and divine abilities were extremely powerful. However, Master God Diviner had already said that even if they had 10,000 guts, they wouldn't dare to go against him. "Master God Diviner, we know what to do." "Very good." Thinking about it, Tong Zun clenched his teeth and said, "Master God Diviner, I have something to say." The God Diviner was normally very gentle, but now he was so cold. No matter what, the God Diviner was the Martial Heaven Continent's #1 expert. His strength was clear for all to see. "Master God Diviner, we can choose not to deal with Longao for 1 year. However, Longao has provoked us time and time again. Are we just going to sit and wait for death and let Longao bully us?" It was obvious who was bullying who. Longao was just one person, while Tong Zun had 3 superpowers working together. No matter where they went, they wouldn't be able to win. As for the provocation, no one could say for sure whether Longao was provoking the 3 superpowers, or if the 3 superpowers were suppressing Longao. However, since Tong Zun had said so, no one dared to say anything. After all, there was only one person in the Martial Heaven Continent, Longao. Not everyone could be Longao. At this time, Long Tian also said, "Master God Diviner, Longao has killed countless of our disciples. Even if we don't deal with him for 1 year, what if he continues to provoke us?" Long Tian's meaning was clear. If Longao wanted to provoke them, would they just sit and wait for death? Even if he was Master God Diviner, that was a bit too domineering. In this kind of situation, Tong Zun and Long Tian were rather tactful. The Myriad Beast Patriarch thought for a moment and said, "Master God Diviner, Longao went to my Myriad Beast sect. Not only did he kill my divine beast, the Xuanwu, but he also killed many of my disciples. You can ask him about this matter. It's not that we're looking for trouble, but that he has been provoking us time and time again. We can't bear it anymore, or we wouldn't have come to the Sword Sect." Chapter 1461. The 3 of them tried their best to fight for their interests. 1 year was a little too long. Longao's variables were too great. No one dared to be certain just how far Longao would grow after a year. Among the 3 of them, Wanshou Ancestor was the most worried, because only the 4 of them knew that Longao had Jianling. At the very least. Once Longao went crazy and swallowed the sword spirit, and if he was lucky, his cultivation would smoothly break through to the peak realm of martial Dao. Who would be Longao's opponent at that time? The marvelous mathematician didn't say anything. He just looked at Longao. He took a step forward. "I don't want to talk about it. I'll come to you in a year." Longao had never thought that the divine mathematician would be like this. There were already many things that could be done in 1 year. If he could break through the Nirvana realm in 1 year, then it should be more than enough to protect himself. At least he wouldn't be so embarrassed if he reached the Nirvana realm. After all, he wasn't strong enough. Mr. Marvelous Mathematician. He waved his hand. Without giving Tong Zun and the other two any chance to speak, the Marvelous Mathematician's face darkened. He said coldly, "You're in the wrong. You're not allowed to hurt Longao in a year. Anyone who disobeys will be killed. Anyone who disobeys will be killed." The Marvelous Mathematician's voice spread throughout the Sword Sect. Everyone heard it very clearly. "Mr. Marvelous Mathematician, what if Longao provokes us?" "Humph, so what?" "Ah?" The Marvelous Mathematician was completely partial to Longao. Everyone could see that. If that was the case, the relationship between the Marvelous Mathematician and Longao was obviously not ordinary. "In a year, no one is allowed to hurt Longao, even if he provokes you. But if Longao joins the Martial Artists Alliance, the Long family, or the Wanshou sect, his life or death depends on his luck." It was unfair. It was completely unfair. Master Godly Mathematician had made his intentions clear. In other words, Longao could provoke the three organizations at any time. Even if he killed your people, you had no choice but to swallow the insult. After all, Longao had Master God Diviner behind him. However, if Longao dared to enter one of the three superpowers' territories, Master Oracle wouldn't interfere. But was this fair? As long as Longao wasn't a fool, he wouldn't join the three superpowers. As long as he fought the three superpowers outside, he would be invincible. "Within a year, as long as you don't provoke me, I won't do anything to you." Before the three of them could react, Longao continued. "1 year from now, I will personally go to the Martial Artists Alliance, Long family, and the Wanshou sect. At that time, I will settle things with you." Arrogant. Longao was arrogant to the extreme. In the eyes of the three superpowers, Longao dared to be so arrogant because he had Master Oracle's help. Otherwise, would Longao dare to do so by himself? Tong Zun, Long Tian, and the Wanshou ancestor all looked extremely gloomy. They were filled with endless anger and unwillingness. Especially the Wanshou ancestor. He didn't know how Longao would deal with Jianling within a year. If Jianling disappeared or was devoured by Longao, what would he do? Wouldn't he lose a chance to reach the peak of martial arts? He couldn't wait. He couldn't drag it out. But what was the use of having 10,000 unwillingness in his heart? Master Oracle's attitude was very clear. Under such circumstances, whoever dared to provoke Master Oracle would be committing suicide. In the eyes of others, the three of them might be incomparably powerful existences, but they knew very well that they were nothing in the eyes of Master Oracle. "Let's go." No one dared to disregard Master God Diviner's words. The three of them looked at each other. In the end, the three of them decided to leave the Sword Sect first. As for Longao, since the matter had already come to this point, then they could only not deal with him for a year. They hoped that Longao wouldn't change too much in a year's time. Otherwise, the three of them would cry themselves to death. Jian Tian did not dare to hesitate at all. He immediately dismissed his disciples, and the crowd gradually dispersed as well. In less than 10 minutes the crowd had dispersed. Only a few people were left: Master Oracle, Longao, Jian Tian, Murongguena, and Yixian. "Longao, I can only help you this much. You still have to rely on yourself in the future. However, it won't be easy for you to reach the Nirvana realm from the Divine King realm in a year's time." Longao nodded his head. How could he not know what Master Oracle was talking about? If he wanted to break through from the Divine King realm to the Nirvana realm, let alone a year, even if it took 8 to 10 years, it was still unknown whether he could break through. However, Longao was very clear that under such circumstances, he had to break through to the Nirvana realm within a year. Otherwise, it would be troublesome after a year. "Thank you, Senior. Longao, I'm here to ask you for a favor. If you agree, it will be of great help to your cultivation." "All right." Longao left with Master Oracle. Before leaving, Longao said a few words to Jian Tian. He wanted Jian Tian to take care of Bai Ling. After all, Bai Ling was still in the Sword Chi space. If he left temporarily, no one knew what would happen to Bai Ling. Longao trusted Jian Tian. He believed that Jian Tian wouldn't do anything to him as long as it wasn't the Sword Chi of the origin, or the time martial skill. Looking at the gradually disappearing figure, Muronguina said with emotion, "Old ancestor, I didn't expect that Master Oracle would come personally for Longao." It seems that Longao not only knows Master Oracle, but also has a good relationship with him. No one was a fool. Even a fool could see that Master Oracle was biased towards Longao. He wouldn't allow the three super forces to deal with Longao for a year, but Longao could choose to join the three super forces. As long as Longao didn't join the three super forces, he would be in an invincible position. Jian Tian nodded. He didn't expect that Master Oracle would suddenly come. He smiled and said, "It seems that we made the right bet this time. If I'm not wrong, Longao should be favored by Master Oracle. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done this." This is basically telling the world that Longao is Master Oracle's man. Otherwise, Master Oracle wouldn't be so biased towards Longao. Muronguina and Yi Xian nodded in agreement. "Old ancestor, what should we do now?" "It's very simple. We only need to do one thing, and that is to fully support Longao. Remember, this support is substantial. I want the dragon sect to become a second-rate power within a year. Is that okay?" Chapter 1462. The sudden appearance of the God Diviner caused Jian Tian's attitude to completely change. Muronguina and Yi Xian naturally knew how serious this matter was. They didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless. They immediately went to make arrangements. The three of them knew that nothing could happen to the soul. For the sake of Longao, the soul was willing to resist the taboo energy. It was the opposite. For the sake of the soul, Longao was also willing to resist the three superpowers. If something happened to the soul in the sect, it would be troublesome. The Sword Sect was one of the 10 major powers. They definitely wouldn't be afraid of Longao. Even if Longao's talent was great, if he wanted to fight the entire Sword Sect on his own, it was wishful thinking. The God Diviner. The only person the three of them were afraid of was the God Diviner. As the number one person of the martial heaven continent, the God Diviner's power was obvious. If the God Diviner wanted to destroy the Sword Sect, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. Although he wasn't sure of the relationship between the Longao and the God Diviner, Jian Tian was certain that the God Diviner was clearly biased toward Longao. Just based on that, he wouldn't lose if he bet on Longao. Jian Tian was a wily old fox. Muronguina was also a wily old fox. This was a rare opportunity. Neither of them would give it up so easily. The God Diviner and Longao didn't leave the Sword Sect. The God Diviner seemed to know about Longao's current situation. They stopped at a mountain peak not far from the Sword Sect. At the peak of the mountain peak, the God Diviner and Longao stood there calmly, allowing the wind to blow past them. If others saw the two of them standing together, it was unknown whether or not it would shake the martial heaven continent. One was the number one person of the martial heaven continent, while the other was the continent's greatest dark horse. Under normal circumstances, with the God Diviner's power and status, there was no need for him to stand with Longao. But now, the two of them were standing together. Time trickled by. As dusk fell, the naked branches were reflected on the ground like a rough sketch. The brushstrokes that were not so serious only left a trace. "Longao, have you thought about the consequences of provoking 3 major powers at the same time?" He didn't know what the oracle meant. "If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. I have no choice. I admire your character and courage, but sometimes you should know when to advance and when to retreat." Longao didn't say anything because he didn't quite agree with Master God Diviner. It was still the same sentence. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I'll pay them back double. Longao didn't say anything, but Master God Diviner had already guessed. He smiled. Longao, you have 3 years to prepare. What did he mean? Master God Diviner's actions left Longao a bit confused, especially now that he had suddenly said that he had 3 years to prepare. What was that supposed to mean? Senior, what do you mean? Longao, do you know about weak space? I do. He didn't hide anything. If it was before, Longao definitely wouldn't have known about weak space. But after this trip to the Myriad Beast Gate, he knew what kind of existence it was. Weak space was the boundary of the Martial Heaven continent. If it was damaged, the continent would be destroyed. The consequences would be unimaginable. Why did Master God Diviner suddenly mention weak space? He was a bit curious. He was a bit puzzled. It's good that you know. I trust you know about my divine divination Tao. Longao nodded. He didn't say anything. How is your divine divination Tao? Longao felt extremely depressed. He helplessly said, Senior, to tell you the truth, ever since I obtained the divine divination Tao, I haven't been able to get through it. It seems I'm not suited to cultivate the divine divination Tao. Although he was a little unwilling in his heart, it was not suitable. It was precisely because of this that Longao directly chose to give up the path of divination. He did not want to waste a minute on useless things. There was no need to say how powerful the divine divination Tao was. It was impossible to say that he didn't want it. It's still too early to talk about the divine divination Tao. Giving it up for now might not be a bad thing. Longao didn't say anything. He knew that Master God Diviner's meaning was coming. Perhaps it was the weak space. Longao, after 10,000 years of divining, I've recently calculated that in 3 years, the weak space will be damaged. Ah? Hearing divine mathematician's words, Longao was immediately taken aback. Longao knew that once the weak space was damaged, wouldn't the Martial Heaven continent be destroyed? It was no wonder Master God Diviner's expression was so grave. I trust you already know that if the weak space is damaged, it will affect the Martial Heaven continent. So I need your help to repair the weak space. If you can break through to the Nirvana Rebirth realm within 3 years, I will do my best to help you break through to the peak of the martial path. How did Master God Diviner know that he knew about the weak space? Could it be that Master God Diviner had already calculated that he had entered the Myriad Beast sect and that his reincarnation clone had entered the weak space? If that was the case, then Master God Diviner's divine divination Tao was truly terrifying. Master God Diviner didn't say anything, and Longao didn't ask. Regardless of how Master God Diviner knew, Longao was very surprised. Repairing the weak space was no simple matter. Senior, forgive me for asking this. Yes. Senior, according to my understanding, the weak space is filled with taboo energy. Under the peak of the martial path, no one can enter it. Since that's the case, what if I can't break through to the peak of the martial path? Breaking through to the peak of martial arts in 3 years, one could imagine how difficult it was. Even with Longao's talent and potential, it was not an easy thing to do. Under normal circumstances, it was almost impossible. The Martial Heaven continent had 2 experts at the peak of the martial path. One was Master God Diviner, and the other was Heavenly Daos. According to Master God Diviner, with his and Heavenly Daos power, it would be very difficult to repair the weak space. Otherwise, Master God Diviner wouldn't have come to find him. If you can't break through to the Nirvana Rebirth realm within 3 years, I will choose to give up on you. At the same time, if the weak space isn't repaired properly, not just you, but the entire Martial Heaven continent will be destroyed. Everyone had a responsibility to protect the continent. Senior, if I can really break through to the peak of the martial path in 3 years, I will do my best to help you. Master God Diviner nodded approvingly. In 3 years, the life and death of the Martial Heaven continent will be decided in an instant. If you want to resolve your enmity, it will have to be resolved in a year. Understood. Senior, I have another question. The Martial Heaven continent has hundreds of Nirvana rebirth experts. If Senior wanted to, you could easily create millions of people at the peak of the martial path. Why did you choose me? Chapter 1463. Regarding this point, Longao could not figure it out very well. It was just as he had said. In the Sky Martial continent, there were at least a few hundred Nirvana realm martial artists, or at least 100. Considering how powerful and resourceful Master God Diviner was, it would be as easy as flipping his hand if he wanted to create someone who had reached the peak of the martial path. After all, the source energy of the Sky Martial continent was not only in the hands of the Heavenly Tao, but also in the hands of the Divine Mathematician. In that case, why did the Divine Mathematician choose him and not the so-called Nirvana realm martial artists? In 3 years, with the help of the Divine Mathematician, which one of them would have the confidence to break through to the peak of the martial path? There was no doubt about it. Everyone knew that the Nirvana realm martial artists were more likely than them. It was impossible for the Divine Mathematician not to know. Longao, no one in the Sky Martial continent can escape from my Divine Mathematician's Tao. Only you. Longao didn't say anything. He just listened quietly. Furthermore, your talent and potential are obvious to all. I believe that in 3 years, your cultivation will definitely break through to the peak of the martial path. I really need your help. It's my duty. Since the Divine Mathematician had already said so, Longao couldn't disagree. At this time, he would choose to fall out with the Divine Mathematician unless there was water in his head. Not to mention, everyone in the Sky Martial continent had a responsibility. After all, if the Sky Martial continent was destroyed, not only him, but even the entire family would be unlucky. In the entire Sky Martial continent, except for the Divine Mathematician and the Heavenly Tao, no one would be spared. Senior, in 3 years, how many peak martial artists will you create? Longao was not a fool. Since the Divine Mathematician had already said so, if there was no accident, the number of peak martial artists that the Divine Mathematician needed in 3 years would not be few. However, the Divine Mathematician shook his head. What did this mean? Longao, the weak space is not as simple as you think. Even if you break through to the peak of the martial path, entering the weak space is a dead end. Speaking of this, the Divine Mathematician looked into the distance, his face full of vicissitudes. The Heavenly Tao will not allow more peak martial artists to appear. Heavenly Tao. In name, he was the strongest expert of the Martial Heaven continent. However, Longao was very clear that if he compared the Heavenly Taos to the God Diviner, the God Diviner's power would definitely far surpass the Heavenly Taos. The God Diviner was the true number 1 expert of the Martial Heaven continent. Under normal circumstances, the God Diviner wouldn't have cared about the Heavenly Tao. Only 3 years later, Longao had already guessed that the Heavenly Tao would occupy the majority of the repair space 3 years later. Under these circumstances, Master God Diviner would definitely not fall out with the Heavenly Tao. Alright, it's time for me to leave. Turning around, Master God Diviner smiled and said, I hope you won't disappoint me. Master God Diviner's figure suddenly vanished. Teleportation? Longao was well aware that Master God Diviner couldn't possibly use spatial teleportation. The only reason he could do that was because of his incredible speed. Although it looked like spatial teleportation, it wasn't. 3 years of crisis. Weak space. All of this felt like a huge joke. Longao knew that if he couldn't break through to the peak of the martial path in 3 years, Master God Diviner would choose to give up on him. At that time, who knew what would happen? He helplessly shook his head. No matter what, this was something that would happen 3 years later. Even the enmity between him and the 3 superpowers would happen a year later. Thinking about it now was just asking for trouble. He didn't continue thinking about it. Longao immediately prepared to return to the Sword Sect. There was only one matter of top priority: Bai Ling had already successfully devoured the heaven and earth spirit vein and entered the sword chi space. According to Xiling, it was only a matter of time before Bai Ling woke up. Even so, Longao was also very worried. Although he knew that Jian Tian wouldn't do anything to Bai Ling, especially since Master God Diviner had arrived, Jian Tian wouldn't do anything stupid. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. If something happened to Bai Ling, he wouldn't be at ease for the rest of his life. It was safest for him to stay outside the sword chi space. Longao had just left the mountain when he ran into his old friend. "Ancestor, you're looking for me?" Looking at Wan Shou Ancestor who suddenly appeared in front of him, Longao wasn't surprised or afraid at all. Because Wan Shou Ancestor didn't have the guts to go against Master God Diviner's words. After all, Master God Diviner's strength was there. If Wan Shou Ancestor disobeyed, not only himself, but the entire Wan Shou sect would be destroyed. The Thousand Beast Ancestor's face was very gloomy. Just as Longao had guessed, with the deterrence of the marvelous mathematician, the Thousand Beast Ancestor would not dare to act recklessly even if he was given 10,000 guts. No one thought that their life was too long. "Longao, I really didn't expect Master God Diviner to suddenly come and help you. You're lucky. If it wasn't for Master God Diviner today, you would be a dead man. There's no point in arguing. Tell me, what do you want from me this time?" Longao didn't want to talk nonsense because he was very worried about Bai Ling's safety. "Good, I like your character. Since that's the case, I'll get straight to the point." "Longao, I need your Jianling. As long as you hand over the Jianling, I can agree to any condition. If not for Master God Diviner's sudden arrival and the 1-year agreement, Wan Shou Ancestor definitely wouldn't have let it go. But things had already come to this point, and Wan Shou Ancestor had no choice but to compromise. The reason was simple. Wan Shou Ancestor didn't want to complicate things. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he was willing to exchange anything for the Jianling. Because Wan Shou Ancestor knew that only when his cultivation reached the peak of the martial way could he stand at the peak of the continent. Today, if he was a peak martial way expert, even if Master God Diviner came, he wouldn't be in such a passive position. He was like a piece of meat that could be trampled on. If Master God Diviner said one, he wouldn't dare to go against him. Everything? That's right. Everything. Except for me committing suicide, I can agree to any condition. How about it? This time, Wan Shou Ancestor was going all out. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said so. Longao sneered in his heart. Jianling itself wasn't that tempting. What really tempted Wan Shou Ancestor was the origin energy, which was the so-called peak martial way realm. If Bai Ling wasn't a peak martial way Jianling, would Wan Shou Ancestor still be like this? There was no doubt about it. "Ancestor, you should know that I can't agree to it. Why do you have to pester me? I'll settle our grudges in a year." Chapter 1464. Anger. Endless anger. Despite the endless anger in his heart, the myriad beast's ancestor forcefully suppressed it. With the oracle's deterrence, the myriad beast ancestor did not dare to act rashly. Otherwise, he would definitely be killed. "Longao, I'll help you break through to the Nirvana realm. With my help, I believe your cultivation speed will greatly increase." Longao only smiled and did not say anything. "Longao, once you break through to the Nirvana realm, we'll devour the Jianling together." Without giving Longao any chance to speak, the myriad beast's ancestor continued. "Longao, I can very responsibly tell you that everything else is just fleeting clouds. Only by breaking through to the peak of martial arts is the right path. So what?" He cursed in his heart. "Longao, hand over the Jianling and not only will the grudge between us be written off, I will also do my best to help you." He turned and left. Longao was not even willing to speak. Hand over the Jianling? It was simply an idiot talking in his dreams. Longao was very worried about Bai Ling's safety. With the oracle's deterrence, Even if the myriad beast ancestor had 10,000 guts, he believed that the myriad beast ancestor would not dare to do anything to him, unless the myriad beast ancestor had a death wish. He did not chase. The myriad beast ancestor knew very well that Longao was still unwilling to agree to his request. This could only mean that Longao would rather die than agree. Even if he chased after him, it would be useless. He might as well think of other ways to get the Jianling. Ancestor, Longao is now fearless and does not take us seriously at all. Big Brother is right. Ancestor, what should we do now? Shifeng, Shichong, and Shirpatian appeared at the same time. Their faces were cold and gloomy because they knew that Longao had nothing to fear because of Master God Diviner. Otherwise, how could Longao be so arrogant? We can't do anything to Longao. Unless we do it a year later, we won't be able to do anything to Longao. If it was an ordinary person, even if it was the heavenly Tao, the myriad beast's ancestor would not be so serious. Only the oracle was different. Master God Diviner's Tao of divine augury could predict anything, and he was worried that Longao would be discovered by him. If that happened, he would be in big trouble. Without absolute confidence, the myriad beast ancestor would definitely not act rashly. Ancestor, I have an idea. Speak. Shirpatian, who had been silent all this time, took a step forward and smiled. Although our 3 clans can't do anything, Master God Diviner didn't say that the other 10 cauldrons can't do anything either. Continue. The myriad beast's ancestor and the others seemed to have guessed the meaning of Shirpotian's words. The 10 cauldrons, Long Family, Alchemy Guild, Martial Artists Alliance, Myriad Beast Sect, Heaven and Earth Sect, 5 Elements Sect, Wanjan School, Sword Sect, Purple Thunder Sect, Black Heaven Sect, Heaven and Earth Sect, 5 Elements Sect, and Sword Sect are all helping Longao. Before Shirpatian could finish, Shifeng interrupted. Wanjan School is also helping Longao. Shirpatian nodded. Shirpatian was helpless. He didn't know where Longao came from, and why the Force superpowers were on his side. It was hard to believe that a small disciple from the 9 States continent could achieve what he had today. Of the 10 cauldrons, 4 of them were on Longao's side. Patian, that's not all. Shifeng said helplessly. The clairvoyant has suddenly appeared. I believe that the remaining 3, Alchemy Guild, Purple Thunder Sect, and Black Heaven Sect, will help Longao. I'm worried that they won't stand on any side. That's true. Shichong nodded in agreement. After all, the clairvoyant's strength was there, and no one was willing to provoke him. If Longao was related to the clairvoyant, they would be in big trouble. Even if they weren't related, everyone knew why the clairvoyant was so biased towards Longao this time. Ancestor, if the remaining 3 are willing to help us, then with the strength of the 3, any one of them will be able to deal with Longao. At this point, Shirpatian and the others knew that it was almost impossible for the other 3 to help them. Only the ancestor would step in. The myriad beast ancestor's status and strength were there. He was the strongest person under the heavenly Tao, and he was not a joke. The myriad beast ancestor already knew what Shirpatian meant. He nodded in agreement. I'll handle this matter. Tong Zun and Long Tian left the Sword Sect, leading their group back to the Long family's Martial Artists Alliance. They didn't stop for a single moment. With the clairvoyant's arrival, Tong Zun and Long Tian definitely didn't want to provoke him, especially at this time. Whether or not they could reach the peak of the martial path was up to the clairvoyant. If the clairvoyant didn't agree, then let alone reaching the peak of the martial path, whether or not they could even survive would be a huge problem. Tong Zun and Long Tian wouldn't be like the myriad beast's ancestor. It wouldn't be too late to deal with Longao in a year. Since that was the case, the 2 of them had already decided to return to their sects and make preparations. In 3 years, their cultivation bases would reach the peak of the martial path, and that would be the time for the Long family and the Martial Artists Alliance to dominate the world. The clairvoyant's sudden arrival in the Sword Sect had caused this battle to become even more famous. Furthermore, The clairvoyant had been so biased toward Longao that everyone on the continent was discussing the relationship between the Longao and the clairvoyant. As the continent's #1 expert, the clairvoyant would normally stay in the Crystal Palace in the Outer Sea. But he had come to the Sword Sect for the sake of Longao. Who would believe that there was no relationship between the two of them? No matter how you put it, the three superpowers had gathered in the Sword Sect and still failed to kill Longao. That in itself was a huge loss of face. Then there was the shamelessness of the three superpowers. It could be said that the reputation of the three superpowers had plummeted. If it was in the past, would the three superpowers have been willing to do such a thing? But now that things had reached this point, even if the three superpowers were extremely unwilling, they could only silently accept it. Who told them to join hands to deal with Longao? That in itself was a joke. The most helpless thing was that he hadn't been able to kill Longao in 3 consecutive battles. It was hard to imagine that Longao was just a god king. If he broke through to the Nirvana realm, other than the god diviner and the heavenly Daos, who would be his match on the martial heaven continent? Wouldn't he be unrivaled? Even the myriad beast patriarch's title would have to be given up. In other words, if Longao's cultivation base broke through to the Nirvana realm, he would be the #1 expert beneath the heavenly Daos. The battle in the Sword Sect had shaken the world. Countless versions of the story had appeared. Longao's fame had soared to the peak. Practically everyone knew the name Longao. Countless people were looking forward to the 1-year agreement. They wanted to see just how much Longao would grow in that 1 year. Chapter 1465. 1 year's time. To a martial artist, it was fleeting. Everyone knew that Longao was only a divine king martial artist. It was almost impossible for him to break through to the Nirvana realm in a year's time. Let's not talk about whether he could break through to the Nirvana realm. Just in a year's time, whether Longao could break through from the Divine King realm to the Peak Divine Lord realm was a huge problem. Cultivation itself was something that defied the heavens. Sometimes. Not to mention a breakthrough in level, even a breakthrough in rank was an extremely difficult thing. For example, from the moment one entered the Divine King realm to the Peak Divine King realm, it was a very long process. Some martial artists were talented and had good opportunities. They might be able to reach it in a few months or years. But some people? Some martial artists even had to spend decades, and might not be able to break through to the Peak Divine King realm. This was the difference. In the end, many people in the Sky Martial Continent did not think highly of Longao. Although the divine mathematician had set a 1-year agreement, within a year's time, the 3 superforces would not be able to deal with Longao. But after a year, what would Longao do? Longao was always alone, and the Dragon Valley alone was unable to help Longao. After all, the strength of the Dragon Valley compared to the 3 superforces was like heaven and earth, and it was difficult to use other things to make up for it. With just Longao alone, it was easier said than done to deal with the 3 superforces. Without the help of the divine mathematician, it was unknown whether Longao could deal with it. No matter what, after the Battle of the Martial Artists Alliance, the Battle of the Long Family, the Battle of the Thousand Beasts Sect, and the Battle of the Sword Sect, Longao's reputation grew. For countless years, no one had ever dared to provoke the 3 superforces like this. It was completely courting death. Only Longao. With one person's strength, he could fight against the 3 superforces alone and retreat unscathed every time. It was simply unprecedented. As for the 3 superforces, being provoked by Longao like this, losing all their face, and being laughed at by the world for being shameless, would the 3 superforces let it go? There was no doubt about it. If nothing unexpected happened, the 3 superforces would definitely not let it go. A year later, Longao and the 3 superforces would definitely fight. At that time, whether Longao would live or die was really hard to predict. About 40% of the people were optimistic about Longao's chances. After all, if Longao could counterattack once, then he could counterattack twice, or even thrice. Furthermore, no one knew whether or not Master God Diviner would continue to favor Longao after a year. No matter what. In the Battle of the Sword Sect this time, the God Diviner was clearly biased towards Longao. However, 60% of the people were still not optimistic about Longao's chances. Once the divine mathematician stopped favoring him, he would be in big trouble. Sword Sect outside the Sword Chi space. Longao, the divine soul has entered the Sword Chi space. According to what you said, the divine soul is devouring the Sword Chi, then there is no doubt that it will take a very long time. He nodded. Longao calculated. Bai Ling had already been in the Sword Chi space for 2 days. It was impossible for her to be so fast. Jianling had already guessed that the spiritual soul that had helped Longao was a Jianling. Jianling was able to resist the taboo power. Even if he wasn't at the pinnacle of martial Tao, he was infinitely close to it. If Jianling and Murongguina could obtain such a Jianling, they would benefit greatly. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't tempted. After much consideration, Jian Tian finally decided to give up. Jianling believed that Longao's Jianling was definitely not at the peak of martial arts. Otherwise, why would Longao be like this? Furthermore. And then there was the threat of Master God Diviner. After all, it was clear that Master God Diviner had taken Longao's side. Furthermore, the two of them had left on their own, and no one knew what their relationship was. It was better to be safe than sorry. If Master God Diviner and Longao really had a good relationship, it wouldn't be worth offending Longao. Longao, in that case, you can stay in the Sword Sect. Things had already come to this point. Longao could only agree. Jianling and Murongguina had already left, but Murong Yener appeared outside the Sword Chi space. She looked worried. Murong Yen liked Longao. Whether it was Jian Tian, Murong Feng Yen, or even Longao, they were all very clear about it. However, Longao was very clear about his own situation. It was impossible for him to accept Murong Yener. Therefore, under normal circumstances, he would try to avoid her. Longao, are you okay? He shook his head with a smile and said, I'm fine. How have you been? As soon as he asked that, Longao regretted it a little. Anyone could see that Murong Yener looked haggard. It was obvious that she wasn't doing well. As for how well she was doing, Longao knew it clearly. However, Murongguina didn't say anything, and Longao didn't continue to ask. I'm very worried about you. Longao was most afraid of this. Except for Aoshue, Yuyin, and Bai Ling, he really didn't want to accept anyone else, including Murong Yener. If he wanted to, not to mention Murong Yener, would he have to accept Murong Yener and the others? Impossible. Longao said with a smile. I'm fine. The two chatted for a while, but the atmosphere was very awkward. After Murong Yener left, Longao sat alone outside the Sword Chi space, quietly waiting for Bai Ling to come out. It was still the same sentence. Except for himself and his family, Longao wouldn't trust anyone, including Jian Tian and Murongguina. Because no one could guarantee that they would change their mind under such a huge temptation. If Jian Tian guessed that Bai Ling was a Jianling at the peak of martial arts, would Jian Tian not be tempted? No matter whether others believed it or not, he didn't believe it. After all, if he devoured Bai Ling, he could get the power of origin and break through the peak of martial arts. How many people could resist such a temptation? If it weren't for his relationship with Bai Ling, he probably wouldn't be able to resist such a thing. Again, the temptation of Jianling at the peak of martial arts was too great. Because of this, Longao stayed here by himself. Even if there were any changes, he could solve it immediately. Ancestor, it seems that Longao doesn't have any feelings for Yener. Nodding, Jian Tian could see that Longao didn't love Yener at all. According to their previous thoughts, if Longao and Yener could be together, it would be beneficial for both Longao and the Sword Sect. You and I can't make the decision about love. I hope they can be together, but we shouldn't interfere, lest Longao is disgusted. It will be troublesome then. After this battle, especially with the marvelous mathematician's favoritism, Jian Tian and Murong Guina's attitude towards Longao had changed again. Chapter 1466. He nodded. Murong Guina was very worried about his daughter. Others might not know, but as her father, how could he not know? Murong Guina did not have a mother since she was young. As her father, there were some things that he could not say. He let out a deep sigh. Just as the old ancestor had said, they could not interfere in the matter between Yener and Longao. Otherwise, if Longao was disgusted, they might go for wool and come home shorn. Old ancestor, no one can break the chi barrier of the Dragon Valley. Even we cannot enter. According to Jian Tian, from now on, they would help the Dragon Valley to increase their strength. But there was trouble. The Dragon Valley was already covered by the chi barrier. Dragon sex people might be able to leave the Dragon Valley, but it was extremely difficult for outsiders to enter. Dragon Valley chi barrier. Unbelievable. Even if all the Nirvana realm martial artists of the three superpowers worked together, including Long Tian, Tong Zun, and the Thousand Beasts' old ancestor, they still could not break the Dragon Valley chi barrier. Was this true? Jian Tian and Murong Guina knew their limits. If even the three superpowers could not break the Dragon Valley chi barrier, even they would not be able to break it. There was no doubt about it. According to Jian Tian, they would help the Dragon Valley silently. When Longao saw this, he would definitely be grateful to the Sword Sect. But now, depressed, Jian Tian said helplessly, I will look for Longao later to discuss this matter. Since we cannot do this in private, we will do it openly. Anyway, we are helping him. I believe Longao will not be ungrateful. Old ancestor, what should we do now? Murong Guina was the Sword Sect master. He should be the one to deal with all matters. However, with Jian Tian's arrival, Murong Guina was obviously just a decoration. He might be able to deal with small matters, but Murong Guina could not make the decision for big matters. Jian Tian was in charge of everything. Let's wait and see. Since things had already reached this stage, this was the only way. With the rise of Longao, everyone in the Sky Martial Continent remembered one person's name, and that was Longao. 5 Elements Sect leader and Heaven and Earth Sect leader entered the Sword Sect to visit Longao, which shocked everyone. The House of 5 Elements and the House of Heaven and Earth were like tripod cauldrons, and the 2 House Lords were both powerful and powerful. Apparently, the main reason they had come to visit Longao was because of Master God Diviner. One could only imagine how powerful the Oracle's deterrence was. Longao had only met him once. After all, the most important thing now was Bai Ling's matter. As for other things, they were not important to Longao. If it was in the past, would the 5 Elements Sect leader and the Heaven and Earth Sect leader be willing? But at this moment, whether it was the 5 Elements Sect leader or the Heaven and Earth Sect leader, they both nodded in understanding. They knew that Longao was very busy and they expressed their understanding. This made Jian Tian laugh coldly. That was how humans were. It was just human nature. Longao did not look down on them at all. If one wanted to survive in the martial heaven continent, other than having absolute strength, they had to do one thing in front of others and another in the back. Outside the sword chi space, Longao did not leave. He just stood there quietly. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. There was still no movement from the sword chi space. Longao still did not know whether Bai Ling had successfully devoured the sword chi or whether she had woken up. His heart was filled with worry. Longao could not suppress his worry. He stomped his feet. How was Bai Ling doing? Longao even wanted to enter the sword chi space, but in the end, he restrained himself. According to Xiling, when Bai Ling was devouring the sword chi, If someone tried to force their way in, not only would that person be in danger, even Bai Ling would be in danger. The sword chi space had already been sealed. No matter who it was, no one was allowed to enter. The sword chi space was originally a forbidden area of the sword sect. However, many core disciples were still able to enter it to cultivate. Longao, nothing will happen to your soul. Yi Xian will stand guard here. Why don't you come with me? I have something to discuss with you. Longao was not the least bit surprised by this change in attitude. That was because of the godly mathematician's power. Longao did not want to go, but this was still the sword sect's territory. The sword sect. Within the palace. Senior Jiantian, may I ask why you're looking for me? Jiantian smiled. Longao, I already know about the Dragon Valley. Since the three superpowers do not dare to attack you, there is no need for your dragon sect to continue hiding in the Dragon Valley. Like this, the dragon sect will forever be a third-rate power. It won't even be able to become a second-rate power. So that's how it was. Longao roughly understood Jiantian's meaning. Thinking about it, this was indeed the case. Even if there were more than 1,000 people in the dragon sect who had obtained the divine Tao inheritance, and all of them had reached the divine Tao realm, so what? Even an ordinary second-rate force could easily annihilate the dragon sect, let alone the 10 Directions tripod. In the end, the dragon sect's starting point was too low. Senior Jiantian, what do you mean? I will do my best to help the dragon sect develop. With the help of the 5 Elements sect, the Heaven and Earth sect, and the Wanzhan school, I am confident that I can help the dragon sect become a second-rate power in less than a year. Furthermore, I will give all the heavenly treasures of the sword sect to the dragon sect. What do you think? This temptation was a little too great. Longao knew very well that Jiantian would not have done this in the past. It seemed that the sudden arrival of the godly mathematician had caused Jiantian and the others' attitude towards him to change drastically. Longao might not have accepted it if it was something else. However, Longao did not want to refuse the family and the dragon sect. The reason was simple. Now that the dragon sect was very weak, they could not hide in the Dragon Valley forever. If they did so, when would the dragon sect end? With the help of the sword sect, the dragon sect would develop much faster. The stronger the dragon sect was, not only for himself, but also for everyone. No matter what he did, he would not have to be afraid of the slightest thing. Thinking of this, Longao nodded and said without hesitation, "Thank you very much, Senior Jiantian." There was no free lunch in the world. Even so, Longao was still very grateful to Jiantian. After thinking about it, he took out a small booklet with the words, "God-slaying technique," written on it. Longao had 2 sword techniques. One was the God-slaying technique, and the other was the remnant of the sword principle. According to Long Fu and Xiling, the remnant of the sword principle was not simple at all. Therefore, Longao could not give the remnant of the sword principle to the sword sect. After thinking about it, in the end, Longao decided to give the God-slaying sword to the sword sect. The God-slaying technique was extremely powerful. It was derived from the God-slaying sword. However, Longao was very clear that the path he wanted to take was not the path of the sword principle. In this case, there was no point in continuing to cultivate the God-slaying technique. It was better to return the favor to the sword sect. Chapter 1467. This is? Looking at the small booklet that Longao took out from his bosom, Jiantian and the other 2 were curious. Could this be a sword art? Apart from the power of origin, only a powerful sword art was very tempting to the 2 of them. Senior Jiantian, Murongena, have you heard of the God-slaying sword? God-slaying sword? The expressions of the 2 men changed. As the originators of the sword Tao, they had heard of the legend of the God-slaying sword. They nodded. Murongena said emotionally, "Of course I have. The god-slaying sword is known as the #1 divine sword in the sky martial continent. However, 10,000 years ago, the god-slaying sword disappeared and no one has been able to find it. God-slaying sword. Other than giving out the god-slaying art, Longao was also prepared to give out the god-slaying sword. He realized that the power of the reincarnation avatar using the deathly bow was far greater than the power of the god-slaying sword. After thinking about it, in the end, Longao decided to give out the god-slaying art and the god-slaying sword at the same time. No matter what happened to the sword sect, they had helped him a lot. Firstly, the sword sect did not choose to hand him over. Instead, he walked out on his own. Secondly, the sword sect lent him the sword chi space without any hesitation. For the above 2 points, Longao wanted to return the favor first because he didn't want to owe anyone a favor. No one spoke. Longao took out the god-slaying sword from the dragon seal space. Whether it was Murongguena or Jiantian, the two of them seemed to have guessed something when they saw Longao take out the god-slaying sword. They looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The two of them were not fools. Since Longao had mentioned the god-slaying sword, there was no doubt that the divine sword that Longao took out was the legendary god-slaying sword. Jiantian was confident that if he could obtain the god-slaying sword, he would be able to defeat Tong Zun and the others with the help of the powerful god-slaying sword. Longao, could it be that the divine sword in your hand is the legendary god-punishing sword? He nodded. Senior Jiantian, Murong Master, this is indeed the God-Slayer sword. However, it is slightly damaged. If the two of you have a way to repair it, I believe that the God-Slayer sword will be able to regain its former might. What did that mean? Hearing Longao's words, the two of them looked at each other again. Longao, are you saying that you're giving the God-Slayer sword to us? He was a little shocked. The two of them knew very well what the God-slaying sword meant. Even if it was as Longao said, if the deity-slaying sword was damaged, then as long as it was repaired, the power of the deity-slaying sword was self-evident. Would Longao really be willing to give such a peerless treasure to the two of them? This God-punishing chant is something I derived from the God-punishing sword. I hope it will be useful to you all. Hearing this, both of them stood up at the same time. Longao. He waved his hand. Even if the two of them didn't say anything, Longao already knew what they wanted to say. The two of you, courtesy demands reciprocity. Thank you for this time. I've already said that I'll remember this great kindness forever. Although I'm also a sword cultivator, I'm prepared to give up. This God-punishing sword is not as good as it is in your hands. So, I hope that the two of you can accept it. Before the two of them could speak, Longao continued. Please accept it. Otherwise, it means that you don't treat me, Longao, as a friend. Then, from today onwards, I won't take a step into the sword sect. He meant what he said. The two of them knew Longao's character very well. Once he had decided on something, he would definitely not change it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done so many crazy things. In that case, thank you very much. It would be a lie to say that they didn't want the God-punishing sword and the God-punishing chant. Without any hesitation, Longao gave out the God-punishing sword and the God-punishing chant. After receiving it, the two of them were pleasantly surprised. As for how to repair the God-punishing sword, that was their problem. Thank you very much. Longao smiled. Longao knew very well that although the God-punishing sword and the God-punishing chant were important, they were nothing compared to Bai Ling. Senior Jiantian, the Dragon Valley has opened. We'll have to trouble you for the rest. The dragon sect had to develop. This was the most urgent matter. No problem. I've already contacted the 5 Elements sect, the Heaven and Earth sect, and the Wanzhan school. We'll do our best to help you. Other than Bai Ling, Longao was most worried about the safety of the dragon sect. Longao, if I'm not wrong, you've just entered the Divine King realm. That's right. Longao did not hide this point at all. After all, there was not much meaning in hiding things like realms. Moreover, from Longao's point of view, the difference in realms was sometimes not impossible to overcome. For example, although Longao was only in the Divine King realm, he did not even care about a Divine Emperor. Moreover, now that he had the Black Tortoise armor, Longao was confident that he could even fight against an Emperor God. The Black Tortoise armor was refined from the Divine Beast, the Black Tortoise. Even a Super Nirvana Realm warrior like Longhang could not break its defense, let alone a Supreme Divine Path warrior. It was even more impossible to break the defense of the Black Tortoise armor. Longao was curious. He did not know what Jian Tian meant by asking this question at this time. Could Jian Tian help him continue to improve his strength? As the number of battles increased, Longao knew that his strength was far from enough. Based on his current strength, he could only win once or twice. How could he keep winning? It was simply impossible. Strength was everything. Without strength, he would not be able to protect his loved ones and family, not to mention his own safety. In this battle of the Sword Sect, if the marvelous mathematician had not appeared at the end and sided with him, Longao knew that he would not be able to escape unscathed. If anything happened to him, it was unknown whether the Sword Sect would still protect Bai Ling, or if he would devour Bai Ling. Senior Jian Tian, what do you mean? Jian Tian and Murongena laughed. Murongena said with emotion, Longao, we have seen the most talented geniuses in the continent, but we have never seen someone as talented as you. Longao, although your talent and potential are unrivaled, your strength is still very low. I believe you have seen the situation. It is very difficult to establish a foothold in the Tianwu continent with just the Supreme Divine Path. Longao nodded. How could he not know what Murongena meant? In the eyes of ordinary warriors, a Supreme Divine Path warrior might be a super expert, but in the Tianwu continent, a Supreme Divine Path warrior was nothing. Unless he broke through to the Nirvana realm, it was very difficult to establish a foothold in the Tianwu continent. Chapter 1468. Longao, if you want to improve your strength quickly, we can help you. As expected. What Jian Tian said just now, Longao had already guessed what Jian Tian meant. Senior Jian Tian, I would like to ask, how are you going to help me? A martial artist's cultivation was against the heavens. Unless they encountered an opportunity, it was extremely difficult to break through a rank. Helping other martial artists to break through their cultivation was not an easy task. Longao, I want to teach you Sword Principle. With your talent and Sword Principle, I can almost guarantee that your cultivation speed will be extremely fast. Sword Principle? Longao had just decided to give up Sword Principle, but Jian Tian mentioned it. All along, Longao thought that he was a genius in Sword Principle and that his cultivation speed was indeed faster than usual. But what was the result? No matter if it was Ziling, Bai Ling, Long Fu, or the mysterious young man, all of them had said that he wasn't suitable for the path of the Sword Dao. If he were to forcefully cultivate it, it would probably hinder his future development of cultivation. That was exactly the case. Longao was extremely unwilling to give up Sword Principle. This was also for the long term. Without any consideration or hesitation, Longao shook his head and said, Senior Jian Tian, to be honest, I have already given up Sword Principle. No matter what, I will not major in Sword Principle. It was a very good thing to assist in the cultivation of Sword Principle. However, Longao would not agree if he said that he would major in Sword Principle. Longao, no one else in the world has the Sword Principle that I will teach you. Thank you for your kindness, Senior Jian Tian. He did not say any more nonsense. With a deep sigh, Longao had already made up his mind. Jian Tian, of course, would not say anything more. The three of them chatted for a while before Longao got up and left the hall. He hurried back to the Sword Chi space. He was very worried about Bai Ling's safety. He did not know whether Bai Ling had succeeded or failed in devouring the Sword Chi. With the retreat of the three superpowers, Tianwu continent was temporarily peaceful. Time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. The night disappeared and the day came. The sun quietly peeked out half of its head. Not long after, the sky was bright and the sunlight shone on every inch of the land. Sword-Chi space opened. Xiling slowly walked out of the sword aura space with Bai Ling looking at the two of them. Longao did not feel the slightest bit of excitement or joy. Instead, his expression changed greatly. Xiling, what's going on? Under normal circumstances, Bai Ling had already devoured the heaven and earth spiritual vein and sword-chi. She should have woken up by now. And the result? Xiling supported Bai Ling. Everyone could tell that Bai Ling was still unconscious. Xiling's face was filled with joy. He smiled and said, Longao, your sister is fine. Seeing Purple Spirit's expression, only then did Longao heave a sigh in relief. If something had happened to Bai Ling, would Xiling be able to smile? Longao, although my sister has not woken up after devouring the sword-chi, her life is no longer in danger. If my guess is correct, the main reason why she hasn't woken up is because of the collision between the heaven and earth spiritual vein and sword-chi. If she wants to wake up, she must first merge these two things. So that's it. How long will it take? As long as Bai Ling did not wake up, Longao would be worried. It will take about 3 months, Li Yao said. 3 months. Longao's heart fiercely thumped. However, things had already come to this point. As long as Bai Ling was fine, everything would be fine. After sending Bai Ling back to the Dragon Seal space and settling her down, Longao asked, Did the sword-chi help you this time? It's okay. However, if my sister and I want to recover to our peak strength, it's far from enough. What should I do? Longao, did the clairvoyant master look for you? Longao was a little surprised. He didn't know why Xiling would ask him this. After all, when the clairvoyant master came to the sword sect to talk to him, Xiling was accompanying Bai Ling in the sword-chi space. If that was the case, how did Xiling know? Without hiding anything, Longao nodded and said, 10 days ago, the clairvoyant master suddenly came to the sword sect. Longao roughly recounted what had happened 10 days ago, including the matter of the weak space. He didn't hide anything either. That was because Longao was very clear that perhaps others didn't know about the weak space, but the sword spirit definitely knew about it. In any case, there were strong and weak people at the peak of martial arts. For example, the clairvoyant master and the heavenly Tao. The clairvoyant master was obviously much stronger than the heavenly Tao. After hearing this, Xiling was not surprised at all. Longao, you're just a chess piece. Chess piece? What was that supposed to mean? Xiling's words made Longao a bit gloomy. At the same time, he was confused. He didn't know why Xiling would say he was just a chess piece. Whose chess piece was he? Could it be that Xiling was saying he was just a chess piece of the clairvoyant master? Without waiting for Longao to ask, Xiling continued. There are some things I can't tell you. However, Longao, you have to remember that no matter what, you can't trust anyone. Xiling's words made Longao even more curious. Just what did he mean? The weak space is a place that the martial heaven continent cannot touch. Once it's broken, no matter who it is, other than those at the peak of martial arts, they will all be killed by that taboo energy. I'm aware of that, Longao replied. Of course, he was well aware of what Violet Spirit was talking about. Because of that, he was prepared to help Master God Diviner repair the weakened space in the 3-year agreement that Master God Diviner mentioned. Everyone had a responsibility to protect the continent. If the weak space was broken, not just him, but even the entire dragon sect would be wiped out. No matter who it was, Longao was prepared to do his part. Longao, listen to my advice. In 3 years, don't go to the weak space. I'll help you. Even if the weak space is broken, you and the dragon sect will be fine. Longao was well aware of Xiling's power. But could he really ignore it? Longao didn't say anything. Because of the matter of the weak space, He had already decided to help the clairvoyant master repair it. However, he couldn't ignore Xiling's warning. After all, Xiling wouldn't say something like that for no reason. Xiling, what is it? Just say it. Longao, I just said that there are some things that even I can't say. Otherwise, we'll both be in trouble. Since things have already gotten to this point, I advise you to take care of your current matters and investigate your origins. Origins? What did that mean? Longao was helpless to the extreme. He didn't understand a single word of what Xiling was saying. Why would this matter suddenly involve his origins? Chapter 1469. Longao, I believe you're familiar with the Reincarnation Clan. He nodded. Longao felt helpless. He didn't know what Xiling meant. Xiling, I can't take it anymore. Let's get straight to the point. You don't have to do this. As for the Reincarnation Clan, Longao wasn't unfamiliar with them at all. Because of the reincarnation disc, the mysterious young man's words, and Xiling's and Bai Ling's calculations, Longao knew that he was the reincarnation of an expert from the Reincarnation Clan. Longao wasn't sure how powerful his original body was. But he was sure of one thing. The Reincarnation Clan was the most powerful clan in the world. Even the three supreme clans of the spiritual beasts and the human race couldn't compete with the Reincarnation Clan. As for how the Reincarnation Clan was destroyed, it was still a mystery. In fact, Longao wasn't sure if he was the reincarnation of an expert, or if he was from the Reincarnation Clan. The only thing he was sure of was that he had a close relationship with the Reincarnation Clan. Even without Xiling's reminder, Longao planned to find out the truth in the future. But not now. Longao, what I mean is simple. He thought for a while. Xiling continued. If you're really from the Reincarnation Clan and are the reincarnation of an expert from the Reincarnation Clan, then your original body must be extraordinary. If you can find out about your origin and awaken your original body's power, I can guarantee that your cultivation speed will be countless times faster. It was easier said than done. Looking at Xiling in front of him, Longao suddenly sighed deeply. At this moment, Longao's face was full of vicissitudes. He was like a century-old man who had seen the world. Xiling, do you know me well? Xiling was a little surprised. He didn't know why Longao asked this question. Xiling didn't answer because he really didn't know Longao. I'll find out about the origin of the Reincarnation Clan in the future, but not now. Xiling didn't say anything. He just listened quietly. The dragon sect is still a third-rate force. The matters with Xue Yuan and Bai Ling have yet to be resolved. I can't leave. He was a little annoyed. At this point, Longao didn't want to continue. Now that things had come to this, even if Xiling wanted to say something, he eventually swallowed his words. Bai Ling had successfully devoured the sword energy, so there was no point in staying in the sword sect. After much consideration, Longao decided to leave the sword sect. After all, staying in the sword sect was not a good idea. As Longao prepared to leave, Jian Tian did not hold him back. Looking at the figure that was gradually disappearing, Jian Tian said, Remember, increase your efforts to help the dragon sect. How could Muronguina not know what the old ancestor meant? The current Longao was different. Putting aside Longao's potential, just the oracle's favoritism was enough for the sword sect to help the dragon sect. Moreover, it was a great help. Muronguina's face darkened. Old ancestor, the dragon sect's strength is obvious. It's not possible to develop it in a short period of time. Continue. He wanted to say something but stopped. He had an indescribable expression. Speak. Old ancestor, I believe that Longao will not agree if we send an expert to guard the dragon sect. If a sect doesn't have a super expert to guard it, even if we help the dragon sect develop its power, as long as a Nirvana realm expert can easily settle the dragon sect. Are you really muddle-headed or just pretending? Please speak, old ancestor. As long as we do it, no matter how we do it, Longao will be grateful to us. With that, Jian Tian did not continue. He turned around and left. Before long, he had disappeared without a trace. Murongena was no fool. Naturally, he understood the meaning of the old ancestor. Leaving the sword sect, Longao rushed over to the 9 continents. Under such circumstances, he had many things to do. First of all, he had to deal with the dragon sect. Along the way, Longao could not help but feel uneasy. It was as though he was being targeted by someone. All this while, he had always believed in his instincts. Could there really be someone following him? Just who are you, sir? Why don't you come out and meet me? Hee 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 hee. The moment Longao's words came out, a sinister laughter boomed out from all directions. It was a laughter that had one feeling numb, as though one was possessed by a ghost. Just who was it? Looking at the figure that had suddenly appeared before him, Longao's face changed. He had not expected Yang Yu to still be alive. The person who had been following Longao the entire time was none other than Longao's nemesis, the old ancestor of the Clear Sky sect, Yang Yu. Back when he had destroyed the Clear Sky Peak, Longao had thought that everyone from the Clear Sky sect had fallen. To think that not only was Yang Yu not dead, his strength had even increased tremendously. He was only one step away from the God Emperor pinnacle state. Yang Yu was the so-called Nirvana state martial artist. In fact, Longao had even realized something. This Yang Yu who had suddenly appeared before him was no longer the Yang Yu of the past. It was as though his mind was being controlled by something. His entire being was emitting a sinister aura. It was as though he was shrouded in an endless darkness. It was extremely horrifying. Kill! Yang Yu's eyes were completely red. It was exactly as Longao said. At that instant, Yang Yu had already lost all consciousness. She was just like a tool for killing. As for why she wanted to kill Longao, it was unknown. Yang Yu took a step forward and charged towards Longao. His terrifying dark aura and murderous aura pressed down fiercely. It was as though a dark cloud had covered the sky. His level 4 divine domain had directly suppressed Longao. Not daring to be careless, Longao also released his level 1 divine domain. If it was an ordinary god-king martial artist, the difference in their divine domains would have already doomed him to death. The 4 ultimate realms corresponded to the 4 great divine domains. The difference between a level 1 divine domain and a level 4 divine domain was too great. It was simply an insurmountable gap. However, Longao's situation was completely different. The power of his dark divine domain was extremely great. Even a level 4 divine domain could not suppress it. Even so, Longao did not dare to be the slightest bit careless, because if Yang Yu had a clear mind, he might not have cared too much, but he was worried about Yang Yu's situation, which was completely a killing attack, a typical fighting style that did not care about life. Longao was very clear that it would be difficult to defeat Yang Yu with his own strength. He could only rely on the strength of his reincarnation avatar. In the next moment, Longao summoned his reincarnation avatar from his dantian and pulled the silent divine bow in his hand. As Longao's cultivation base broke through to the ultimate realm, the reincarnation avatar's cultivation base also broke through to the divine emperor realm. It was 1 level higher than Longao. According to the reincarnation avatar's strength, it was enough to kill a hierarch martial artist. Even a nirvana martial artist would not be able to kill the reincarnation avatar. Once the reincarnation doppelganger used the annihilation divine bow, even if it was an emperor god, it would still be killed. Previously, in the battle at the Sword Sect, Longao had relied on the reincarnation doppelganger to delay time. Chapter 1470. The reincarnation avatar quickly drew the silent destruction bow. Swoosh! The arrow light shot out like a bolt of lightning. According to Longao's estimation, Even if Yan Yu's cultivation had broken through to peak Emperor God realm, it would be extremely difficult for her to block the power of the silent destruction bow. In the end, Yan Yu ignored the arrow light as though nothing had happened. What was going on? His heart was filled with endless shock because Longao never would have thought that Yan Yu's strength was already so strong that she could actually forcefully resist the might of the Annihilation Divine Bow. He took 3 steps back. The reincarnation avatar disappeared and returned to Longao's dantian. Before Longao could react, Yan Yu was already in front of him. She slapped her palm on Longao's left shoulder. According to the defense of an ordinary divine king, there was a 99% chance that he would die if he was hit by a peak emperor god. Except for Longao. Longao had the black tortoise armor. Even if Yan Yu was not right, she would not be able to break through the defense of the black tortoise armor. Not only Longao, but even Yan Yu was shocked. She did not manage to break through his defense. Until now, he was still scared because Longao knew that if it was not for the black tortoise armor, he would have been killed by Yan Yu. What happened to Yan Yu? Longao had a feeling that even if Yan Yu's cultivation was only at peak Emperor God realm, her strength had surpassed peak Emperor God realm. She was a Nirvana realm warrior. She was at Emperor God realm, but she had the strength of a Nirvana realm warrior. There was no way he could win this battle. If he continued, he would only lose. Go. Longao knew his own strength. Yan Yu's situation was unclear, and there was no need for him to fight head-on. Longao used spatial teleportation to leave, but he didn't expect that Yan Yu's speed was even faster than his, which was faster than spatial teleportation. He couldn't even see her figure clearly, and she was already in front of him. The situation was critical. Longao did not hesitate and slapped out a palm. Yan Yu also struck out with her palm. The 2 palms collided. Yan Yu's body did not move at all, but Longao's body flew out like a kite with a broken string. In midair, Longao forcibly turned around. Yan Yu's strength and speed were too terrifying. It was as if she had taken an aphrodisiac. Hee 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 hee. An eerie laughter rang out and spread throughout the world. Yan Yu's face was cold and eerie, as if she had come from hell. Don't even think of leaving today. Really? Just as he finished speaking, Longao's figure had already disappeared in midair. In the dragon seal space. Longao let out a long sigh of relief. His expression was solemn because he couldn't understand why Yan Yu, who was only at the peak God Emperor realm, had the power of a Nirvana realm warrior. It was unbelievable. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it even if he was beaten to death. Longao, are you okay? Shaking his head, Longao took a deep breath and said, I'm fine. I didn't expect Yan Yu to become like this. It's really terrifying. I feel that even Long Hang and the others might not be Yan Yu's match. Definitely. Hearing Xiling's words, Longao's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Xiling knew what was going on? Before Longao could ask, Xiling said, Longao, I believe you already know that Yan Yu was devoured by the remaining power of the blood pool. Although she still has a bit of consciousness, I'm afraid that in less than a month, Yan Yu will completely become a killing tool. Not only that, once Yan Yu loses her consciousness, I'm afraid that the remaining power of the blood pool will be reborn. When that time comes, I'm afraid that the dragon seal won't be able to suppress the blood pool. Miss Xiling is right. Long Fu, who had been silent all this while, had a solemn expression. Master, you have to kill Yan Yu as soon as possible. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Kill Yan Yu? Easier said than done. I believe that you've already seen Yan Yu's strength. With my strength alone, I can't kill Yan Yu. Even if I use the reincarnation doppelganger, it won't work. Longao, of course, knew the seriousness of the matter. Once the blood pool broke the seal and left, not to mention the others, he alone would be in big trouble. Master, you can use the power of the blood pool to eliminate Yan Yu. What do you mean? Longao was curious. Yan Yu had already been devoured by the remaining power of the blood pool. How could he use the blood pool to deal with Yan Yu? Could it be that his own people would deal with their own people? Master, the blood pool weapon spirit. Next, Long Fu quickly told Longao what to do. After all, Yan Yu was outside. No one knew when Yan Yu would leave. It was best to deal with her as soon as possible. Otherwise, once Yan Yu completely lost her consciousness in a month, the consequences would be unimaginable. Outside the dragon seal space, Yan Yu still had some consciousness. Otherwise, she wouldn't seek revenge on Longao. She coldly looked around. Although Longao had already disappeared, Yan Yu didn't leave. She was still guarding this place. Yan Yu, you want to kill me? Yan Yu seemed to have recovered some of her consciousness. Unlike before, she coldly smiled and said, Longao, aren't you very powerful and arrogant? I'd like to see how you're going to escape from my hands today. Shameless boasting. If it wasn't for the sake of killing Yan Yu, Longao wouldn't be able to find him even if Yan Yu's strength was heaven-defying. Not wanting to waste any more words, Longao summoned the little mouse from the dragon seal space. Squeaking sounds could be heard and a black shadow flickered. The little mouse heard Longao's command and immediately charged towards Yan Yu. According to Long Fu's orders. Although the little mouse's strength wasn't enough to kill a god emperor, it was a great counter to Yan Yu. In the beginning, Longao was worried that the little mouse wouldn't be able to counter Yan Yu. However, after the battle, it was obvious that the little mouse countered Yan Yu. According to this situation, as long as there was enough time, the little mouse would definitely be able to kill Yan Yu. Want to leave? Seeing that Yan Yu wanted to leave, Longao directly summoned his reincarnation clone from his dantian. With an undying body, even Yan Yu couldn't kill his reincarnation clone. Fighting 2 against 1, Yan Yu was gradually losing. Longao was delighted. If Yan Yu were to escape this time, she would definitely become a huge threat to him in the future. It was because of this that Yan Yu had to die. He couldn't find any trouble for himself. Yan Yu was continuously attacked by the little mouse and his reincarnation clone. No matter how strong Yan Yu's defense was, she couldn't withstand such torment. After dozens of rounds, Yan Yu's body was covered in blood. She looked extremely terrifying. Longao, don't think that you've won. Today, I'll show you my master's strength. What was the meaning of this? Chapter 1471. False bravado? Yan Yu was already at death's door. Longao didn't even put Yan Yu's threat in his eyes. The result? Yan Yu's body suddenly exploded with an unparalleled blood mist, repelling Little Mouse and the reincarnation avatar. Not daring to be careless, Longao sent Little Mouse back to the dragon seal space and the reincarnation avatar back to the dantian space. His eyes were fixed on Yan Yu. Self-destruction. Longao finally knew what Yan Yu was trying to do. She knew that she was going to die, but she came up with such a method. Not to mention Yan Yu, even an ordinary emperor god's self-destruction couldn't be underestimated. Any normal person wouldn't do such a thing, even if they knew that they were going to die. The reason was simple. Once she chose to self-destruct, no one within a 100-meter radius would be spared. Yan Yu had chosen to self-destruct, and its power could not be underestimated. Longao did not dare to stay any longer, and prepared to enter the dragon seal space. However, the result shocked Longao, because for some unknown reason, Yan Yu's self-destruction had actually restricted the surrounding spatial fluctuations, and he was unable to enter the dragon seal space. What should he do? The situation was urgent, and it could be said that it was a matter of life and death. Because of Yan Yu's self-destruction, even the black tortoise armor might not be able to withstand it. If it were other Emperor God experts, Longao wouldn't be worried at all. After all, the defensive power of the black tortoise armor was there for all to see. Only Yan Yu was swallowed by the remaining power of the blood pool. No one knew how powerful the self-destruction would be. "Master, leave this place quickly!" Without needing Long Fu's reminder, Longao turned and left quickly. However, it was too late. Yan Yu's body had disappeared, and what appeared was a huge blood mist. It was as fast as lightning and enveloped Longao. In the next second, Longao's body was covered by the blood mist. Within the blood mist, Longao used all his strength to activate the black tortoise armor. Even so, Longao could clearly sense that the surrounding blood mist was slowly seeping into the black tortoise armor. Although the black tortoise armor's defense was very strong, it was unable to withstand the corrosion of the blood mist. If this situation continued, he would be devoured by the blood mist in less than an hour. At that time, he would become the next Yan Yu, devoured by the remaining power of the blood pool and turned into a killing tool. What should I do? At the moment of life and death, he had to think of a solution as soon as possible. Otherwise, the more time he wasted, the more danger he would be in. Firmament devouring art. No matter how he thought about it, Longao was unable to come up with a good idea. In the end, he decided to use the firmament devouring technique. He knew very well that he would not be able to resist the corrosion of the bloody mist with his own strength, even if he used the black tortoise battle armor. Since that was the case, he might as well take the risk. Since he could not resist the bloody mist, he would just devour it directly. As for the consequences of devouring the bloody mist, he could not care less. The firmament devouring art was an exceptional martial technique that had been comprehended from the primal chaos stone tablet. A huge black hole appeared behind Longao and started to devour the surrounding blood mist. The speed of the devouring was like a whirlpool, as if it was a bloody mouth that was devouring everything. After devouring the bloody mist for a few minutes, Longao felt as if his body was boiling water. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the blood within his body rose continuously. When Yan Yu self-destructed, the bloody mist seemed endless. Longao had used the firmament devouring art to devour the bloody mist for more than 20 minutes. What kind of concept was this? Could the bloody mist from Yan Yu's self-destruction be a bottomless pit? There was no way around it. Longao endured the burning sensation in his body and continued to devour the bloody mist. He couldn't stop. If he stopped, the bloody mist would continue to devour the Xuanwu battle armor. Once the Xuanwu battle armor was completely devoured, the bloody mist's next target would be himself. At that time, how would he be able to resist the bloody mist's corrosion? He couldn't relax in the slightest. The black hole behind Longao began to spin faster and faster. 9 provinces continent the Dragon Valley's sword world hadn't disappeared. However, the dragon sect had begun to operate again. Because of the God Diviner's deterrence, whether it was the Myriad Beast sect, the Martial Artists Alliance, or the Long family, none of them dared to do anything to Longao and the Dragon sect for a year. Like this, the Dragon sect no longer had any worries. At this moment, the Dragon sect was the absolute overlord of the 9 provinces continent. In the hearts of the people of the 9 provinces continent, the Dragon sect was like a god. They didn't care about the existence of the martial heaven continent. Perhaps this was the restriction of the continent. It was very difficult for the people of the 9 provinces continent to accept the existence of the martial heaven continent. After the Battle of the Dragon Valley, the Dragon sect's name had shaken the world. 3 superpowers, the Myriad Beast sect, the Martial Artists Alliance, and the Long family had joined hands. Even with all their Nirvana experts, they hadn't been able to break through the Dragon Valley. Just this point alone made the Dragon sect worthy of respect. As soon as the Dragon sect recovered, the Sword sect began to help them develop on a large scale. It was still the same saying. Even with the help of superpowers, the Dragon sect didn't have any experts to protect it. How could Longao and the others not know this problem? After hearing about Sun Tzu's battle with the Myriad Beast sect and the Sword sect, the Dragon sect's members all broke out in cold sweat for Longao. This kind of courage was enough to look down on the world. Proud. Everyone felt proud for Longao. After all, he was able to fight against 3 superpowers. In this world, besides Longao, how many people could do this? It was completely unprecedented and would never be replicated in the future. In the Dragon Valley, in a very elegant and secluded pavilion, Longao and Wang Yidao sat quietly. Their expressions were unknown. There was joy, worry, and even more unease. Brother Longao has caused a huge ruckus in the Myriad Beast sect and escaped danger. I don't think the 3 superpowers will let this matter go. We must quickly develop the Dragon sect. This way, we can help Aoer to a greater extent. Otherwise, no matter what, Aoer will be fighting alone. Fighting alone. Hearing Wang Yidao's words, Longao felt extremely guilty. Because since the rise of Longao, it had been Longao who was fighting outside while they were comfortably hiding in the Dragon Valley. This time, if it wasn't for the sword realm that Aoer had set up, the Dragon Valley would have already been breached by the 3 superpowers. Everyone in the Dragon sect would probably have been annihilated. Yes, although we have the help of the Sword sect and the Heaven and Earth sect, it is too difficult to develop into a second-rate force. You should know that in order to become a superpower, besides having a strong foundation and strength, the most important thing is that there must be a super expert in the sect. Before Wang Yidao could speak, Longao continued. With the help of the Sword sect, I am not worried at all. As long as there is enough time, our foundation and strength will definitely rise. The Sword sect, the Heaven and Earth sect, and the 5 Elements sect were all part of the 10 great sects. Their strength was there for all to see. As long as the 3 great sects were sincere in helping the Dragon sect, then there was no doubt that the Dragon sect's foundation and strength would be able to develop in the shortest amount of time. But what about the current problem? Our Dragon sect doesn't have a Nirvana realm martial artist. This is still the only way. In their hearts, a Nirvana realm martial artist was a godlike existence. It was almost impossible for the Dragon sect to have a Nirvana realm martial artist. Brother Long, what should we do now? It's very simple. We will do our best to develop the force. You are right. Aoer and the 3 superpowers only have a year's agreement. In other words, we only have a year's time to prepare. No matter what happens in a year's time, I will do my best to help Aoer. Looking at Longao determined face, Wang Yidao did not speak but clenched his fists tightly. Both of them had decided that in a year's time, no matter how the Dragon sect developed, they would not let Longao fight alone. The Phoenix Race. In a huge cave, Lu Yi was quietly sitting on a cushion to cultivate. Lu Yi had won the Yuan spirit battle against the Myriad Beast's ancestor. It seemed that it had been of great help to her cultivation. In the Martial Heaven continent, the true number 1 expert below the peak of the martial path was not the Myriad Beast's ancestor, but Lu Yi. However, even now, no one knew about the Yuan spirit battle of the Myriad Beast sect. No one knew that Lu Yi had defeated the Myriad Beast's ancestor. Otherwise, a Yuan spirit battle would have shaken the continent. Master, I have something to report. Grand Elder, please come in. The Great Elder was the most powerful phoenix in the Phoenix clan. He also had the purest phoenix bloodline. Lu Ye's bloodline was similar to that of a human. However, her bloodline was much stronger than the Great Elder's. Otherwise, the immemorial phoenix would not have chosen Lu Yi for enlightenment. It was because of this that although the Great Elder was very unwilling, he also knew the difference in bloodline and how great the impact was. Others might not know, but as the Grand Elder of the Phoenix race, he was well aware of how powerful his master was. She was only a step away from the peak of the martial path. As long as she obtained the core energy, it would only take a few months for her master to break through to the peak of the martial path. She would be on par with the heavenly Das. However, the core energy was guarded by the heavenly Das. No matter who it was, no one could obtain it. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for a peak expert to not appear after so many years. In the end, the godly mathematician and the heavenly Taoists were unwilling to have a new peak expert appear. They were afraid that it would affect their status. Grand Elder, is something the matter? Lu Yi was very curious. When he was in seclusion, unless something major happened, the Grand Elder would not personally come. Could it be that something had happened in the race? As if he could guess what Lu Yi was thinking, the Grand Elder gravely said, Master, I don't know if you still remember who Ao Xue's sweetheart is. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.